You wake in the dimness of the stone cell, your eyes opening slowly to the rough ceiling above. The chill of the air clings to your skin, and your hand rests on the straw mattress, scratchy and uneven, scattered with husks that poke at your palm. The stone walls, thick and unmoving, breathe cold into the room. The mortar smells faintly of dampness, as if it has absorbed centuries of rain and whispered prayers. You hear nothing at first but the soft drip of water somewhere in the corner, echoing with patient rhythm. A thin blanket of wool, coarse against your bare ankles, lies tangled from restless shifting. You inhale slowly, and the breath carries with it the taste of stale smoke from yesterday's hearth, faint and lingering like a memory. Your feet find the flagstones, colder than the air, smoother than the straw, each slab uneven with cracks worn down by steps long gone. You sit a moment with your head bowed, shoulders rounded, feeling the weight of morning that has not yet begun. The air tastes of stone dust and damp straw. You hear a crow outside the wall, its cry stretched and sharp before vanishing into silence. The small slit of a window holds no light yet, only a faint grey glow that seeps reluctantly through the bars. You reach for your robe, rough woven wool, its sleeves sagging and frayed at the edges. It holds the faint scent of smoke, of onions sliced too thin the day before, of damp wool warmed by fire. Pulling it over your shoulders is like sinking into something both heavy and familiar. The rope belt scratches your waist as you knot it clumsily. Your hands are stiff, your knuckles dry from the cold. You rub them together slowly, hearing the faint rasp of skin against skin. You stand and sway a little, your legs remembering the weight of your body. Your sandals wait near the cot, worn leather straps curling back like tired vines. The soles are cracked, the edges frayed, but they take your feet without question. You walk a few steps across the stone, each footstep a dull thud in the stillness. The air does not stir, the silence is thick. You hear your own breath louder than you should. The walls around you are bare but for a wooden peg, where a small cloth hangs. It smells faintly of lye and river water, stiffened with repeated washing. You brush it with your hand, and it swings slightly, the movement almost too loud in the hush. Beside the cot sits a wooden bowl, dry now, streaked faintly with old porridge clinging like hardened paste. You tilt it, listening to the hollow sound it makes on the floor. Your back straightens slowly as you walk toward the door. The iron hinges creak faintly when you touch the wood, worn smooth where countless palms have pressed. Beyond, waits the long corridor that smells of dust, candle smoke, and the faint sour trace of spilled broth. You pause before opening, listening to the distant hush that lies beyond. You stand in the cold cell a moment longer. The air presses gently against your skin. The silence fills your ears. Your thoughts drift like smoke curling lazily upward, unfocused and soft. You feel the weight of your robe, the roughness of straw clinging to your sleeve, the faint prickling on your ankle where a husk still rests. There is no urgency, no haste, only the stillness of stone and the patient rhythm of a life measured by bells and silence. You breathe in, you breathe out, and the walls hold your breath as if they have been waiting for centuries to do so. You step into the corridor, your bare feet shifting inside cracked leather sandals, and the sound echoes faintly down the long stone passage. The air is cool here, holding a dampness that rises from the earth and settles into every joint of the monastery walls. Your fingers brush the rough plaster as you move forward, the texture crumbling slightly beneath your touch. It feels like dust, yet older than dust, as though the wall has been touched by countless hands before yours, each leaving behind something invisible. The distant bell begins to toll. Its iron tongue strikes against the hollow body, and the sound unfurls slowly into the morning. It is not urgent, it is not hurried. It rolls through the hall like a stone pushed gently along a slope, heavy and inevitable. The sound trembles in your chest, settles in your ribs, and lingers even after the echo fades. You walk with measured steps, each one cushioned by silence except when the stone floor catches your heel and sends a faint scrape forward. The corridor bends slightly, and a small door creaks open ahead. A brother, shoulders wrapped in wool, slips out and walks before you without a glance. His feet shuffle, his breath shallow. You follow quietly, the rhythm of sandals dragging against stone merging with your own. The door at the end of the passage is heavier, iron-banded, thick oak that smells of old smoke and beeswax rubbed in with tired rags. You press against it with your shoulder, and the weight yields slowly, as if reluctant to open. The moment it does, a stream of cold air greets you, sliding over your robe and tugging at your sleeves. You step into the cloister walk, open to the central courtyard. The courtyard is pale in the faint grey before dawn. The grass glistens with dew, and puddles cling stubbornly to the corners where stones have sunk. Water drips from the eaves in long, slow beads that splash into barrels below. The air carries the scent of wet earth, moss, and a hint of smoke from last night's fire. You hear the shuffle of feet around you as others gather, heads bowed, shoulders curved. No words are spoken. No greetings are given. The bell continues its patient rhythm, each note spilling over the cloister arches, mixing with the sound of sandals on stone. You move with the line, slow and even, toward the chapel door. The doorway is low, making you bend slightly as you enter. The stone threshold is worn down in the middle, hollowed from years of weight passing over it. Your foot slides naturally into the groove. Inside, the chapel smells of beeswax, smoke, and damp wood. Candles flicker, their flames small and pale against the vast darkness. The benches creak softly as the brothers settle. You move to your place, the wood polished by generations of robes brushing against it. The air is colder here, the stone walls drinking up every bit of warmth before it can spread. The silence is complete except for the bell's final strike and the shuffle of cloth. Your breath sounds louder now, rising and falling in slow rhythm. You lower your head, your hands resting lightly on your knees. Around you, the chapel feels like a cavern, the ceiling lost in shadow, the air heavy with stillness. You hear the faint clearing of a throat, the rustle of a sleeve, and then nothing more. It is as though time itself hesitates, waiting. You feel the wooden bench beneath you, solid and unyielding. You smell the faint smoke lingering in your robe from yesterday's hearth. You see the candle flames tremble when the air stirs ever so slightly. The morning has begun, though nothing seems to move quickly. The bell has done its work, calling bodies from straw and stone, guiding them through silence, bringing them here. You sit, motionless, breathing in the waxy air, listening to the soundless weight of stone pressing down, and letting the stillness of this hour seep into your bones. You leave the chapel with the slow stream of robes, your steps measured, your breath even. The corridor keeps the last taste of candle smoke. Stone returns the sound of sandals in patient echoes. You pass the cloister walk, pale with weak morning, and come to the refectory door, its latch bright with use. You lift it and enter with the others. The room is long and simple. Narrow windows admit a banded grey that lies across the tables like faded cloth. Benches wait in straight lines. The air offers the reliable mixture of wet wool, old ash, tallow, and the cereal warmth of a pot that has been kept just below a simmer. Nothing about it promises delight. It promises breakfast, and that is enough. You sit. The bench gives a little creak that answers the stiffness in your back. Before you sits a shallow wooden bowl, the grain dark at the rim where spoons have made a soft groove. The spoon beside it is smooth, pale where thumbs have worn it thin. You rest your hands while the line moves, and you let your eyes quiet themselves in the low light. At the far table, a ladle rises and falls. Porridge slips from it in reluctant folds and lands with a modest sound in each bowl. When yours arrives, the ladle lip taps once against the rim and leaves a pool that steams a little, then becomes shy about being seen. The surface settles with a thin skin you could break with a breath. You lift the spoon and taste. Barley, a breath of oat, perhaps a memory of salt taken from the pot. Warmth spreads just enough to be noticed. It does no more because it has no more to do. You let it sit on your tongue, and then you swallow. You take another careful spoonful, and agree with the morning that this is the proper speed. Around you, the refectory fills with small, obedient noises. Someone coughs, and turns it into a sigh. A spoon knocks a rim. A sleeve slides along wool. Chewing is quiet and dutiful. The sound of men keeping company with a thin meal. Words would be heavy here, and there is nothing for them to carry. Silence holds better than speech. You look up without lifting your head, the way one learns when silence is law. Window light makes a pale stripe across the table and stops there. Opposite you, hands cradle a bowl as if it might wander off. Farther along, a face bends low to drink the last sweetness where grain has settled. A candle on the wall smokes once, leaves a small crescent stain, and behaves itself again. At the corner, the doorway to the kitchen is open. It is only a rectangle of warmer air, but it has its own weather. A slow breath of banked coals, a faint sting of onion, the steadier note of damp wood drying by the hearth. A figure passes that square now and then. The motion is unhurried, practical, and not meant for the refectory at all. You are not watching. You happen to be facing that way when the shadow moves. Your spoon pauses and resumes. The pause is no event. The resuming is the point. Bread travels down the table in a wooden bowl. A heel is torn into ready pieces. When it reaches you, a hand offers a crust. Your fingers touch the other's knuckle because space is small and bowls are many. The touch is dry and factual. Still, the skin knows it happened. You nod without looking up and put the crust between your teeth. The edge is tough. The heart is soft. Your jaw does what it knows. Water follows in a jug with a whitened lip from years of careful tapping. You tip it into your bowl and watch the last of the porridge loosen, swirl, and give up the sides. 2 circles with the spoon around the rim, one across the center, the simple ritual that sends the bowl on with a trace of cleanliness and a record of use. At the far end, someone else makes those circles too. The room keeps the rhythm and then forgets it. You breathe through your nose and take stock of the morning as it is. Grain, ash, wool, a hint of iron from the spoon. The food asks nothing but presence, and you give it. Your back straightens without flourish. The bench presses its familiar line into your spine. Dust hangs in a slant of light, and then changes its mind about being interesting. From the kitchen doorway comes a small sound that wants to be laughter, and thinks better of it. It fades before it can collect a shape. You glance at the spoon, consider polishing it with your sleeve, decide to let the washing place have that work. Your hands rest, one thumb smoothing the other. The table under your palms feels warm, where many hands have left a quiet heat. The little handbell at the lectern speaks once, a light ring that asks the room to finish what it is doing. Bowls gather, spoons settle. Benches scrape the floor with polite complaint as bodies rise. You stand with the rest and feel your knees tell you the news you already know. You set your bowl on another and pass the small stack along. The jug makes a final arc and is carried away. In the narrow line for the door, a sleeve brushes your sleeve. The contact is wool upon wool, no more, no less. You let it be and do not name it. At the threshold, you glance toward the kitchen as anyone glances at a hearth. Heat lives there, and it has a way of finding faces. It finds yours and leaves a soft pressure you could pretend not to notice. You do not bother with pretending. You step back into the corridor. Behind you, the refectory folds its echoes and keeps them for another hour. Ahead, the day arranges itself in small tasks, buckets to fill, knives to sharpen, herbs to hang where air can do its work. You walk toward those tasks at the pace the bell set. The porridge has been what porridge is. Morning has agreed to be morning. You breathe once, taste barley one last time, and go. You push the kitchen door with your shoulder, because your hands prefer pretending they are warm. The hinge gives a tired sigh, and the room receives you in the colour of old iron. Banked coals glow like the last thoughts of yesterday, tucked under grey ash that remembers being wood. The smell is a patient mixture: wet hearth, onion skins, last night's cabbage, and a sweetness that might be apples deciding to become vinegar. The air is cool enough to nip your nose, yet the promise of heat sits near your knees, breathing under ash as if it needs coaxing to remember its name. The hearth keeps its slow, square mouth. Soot makes a velvet border around the opening, soft and black, a frame that refuses polish. You crouch and lift the lid of the ash box, feeling grit settle under your nails. The coals, reticent and red, blink at you. You give them dry twigs first, the kind that sound like snapped bone when they break. Birch peelings, rosemary stems from the herb table, a twist of straw, all the small things that agree to burn without needing compliments. Smoke considers the chimney and chooses a tour of the room instead. It slides down, then sideways, then curls across your cheek, watering your eyes with more enthusiasm than comfort. You wave it away, which naturally encourages it. The chimney clears its throat, unimpressed by your optimism. You try again, breath careful, feeding the coals with patience you did not remember packing when you left the cold cell. The twigs take. They do not celebrate, they simply behave. A thread of flame runs along a rosemary stem and finds a pine sliver, which obliges with a faint resin sigh. You add a sliver of plum wood, saved for mornings, because it carries a quiet sweetness when it burns. The sound is the softest crackle, like cloth rubbed between fingers. Heat remembers its job. Your knuckles feel it first, then your wrists, then the small tired place in each forearm where work likes to linger. You reach for the damp logs, the ones that sulked outdoors beneath a half-hearted awning during last night's rain. Their bark is dark and smells of riverbank. You set two at the back to warm, not to burn. This is the hour for counseling wood about its future. Another pair you angle above the eager little flame so the fire can think about them without commitment. A hand appears beside yours on the billet, steadying the awkward length as you shift it into place. You do not need help, so of course help arrives, steady and unhurried, then withdraws as if it merely wished to confirm gravity. The bellows lie where they always lie, a tame creature with a leather lung. You work them with measured presses, coaxing air through ash until the coals show their teeth. Sparks rise and touch the hood, then fall back, undecided. The fire grows with the unhurried certainty of a lesson repeated for years. It promises nothing grand. It agrees to be sufficient. You allow yourself the small luxury of approval, the kind that does not require words. Copper pots hang along the wall, each catching a different square of pale morning and keeping it. You run a cloth over the nearest, and your reflection returns as a smudge wearing a hood. The hooks complain in little iron voices as you lift a pot from its place. Water sloshes from the barrel grey at the top, where ash has floated and then reconsidered. You pour. The pot accepts the weight and settles on the trivet with a sound like a polite cough. Caraway seeds wait in a clay bowl, their thrift of fragrance sharp enough to wake a stew when the moment comes. A braid of onions hangs by the door. You choose the humble ones, papery skins freckled with dirt, necks tight against their own patience. The knife takes their ends, your fingers remember not to hurry. The board records each cut in shallow grooves from years of similar mornings. The first onion encourages your eyes to complain, but the smoke has already claimed that stage. You blink and continue, letting tears be a simple kind of salt. From the yard, a gust arrives, shouldering the door inward, bringing the smell of wet straw and the faint animal tang of wool cloaks drying on pegs. The flame leans, considers a new direction, and then returns to its duty. You place a log carefully, then another, leaving the small tunnel that every hearth nurse knows. The fire appreciates not being smothered. You appreciate being appreciated by something as honest as flame. Across the room, the bread oven keeps its own counsel, a domed hush mottled with charcoal kisses. You slide your palm along its flank. The stone is night-cool still. Later, it will cradle loaves that open along their scoring like slow smiles. For now, it is only a round, patient silence that minds its time. You leave it to its silence and return to the pot that will speak sooner. The first water begins to move. Not a boil, just a thoughtful shifting, as if the pot is testing its joints. You sweep the onion into it, add a pinch of salt sturdy as river gravel, and a whisper of caraway that seems to ring a tiny bell only the broth can hear. The scent lifts and wanders, touches the rafters, visits the stacked baskets, tries out the corners before choosing to hover by the hearth where it belongs. Another presence returns at the edge of your vision, setting down a bundle of damp sticks you had not asked for, but will use by and by. The bundle makes a soft, resigned sound. They found these near the wall. The voice says low, careful, as if the room might bruise. You nod without turning. They will learn to be dry, you answer, fair to sticks and to anything else listening. The bundle is nudged nearer the hearth. A sleeve grazes your sleeve wool, taking note of wool, and then nothing asks to be said. You check the ash bed with the poker, opening small paths so the coals can breathe. They glow brighter, pleased to be noticed. A thin curl of flame reaches for your cuff and then loses interest. On the shelf, a crock of rendered fat waits, pale and solid, a winter truth in a clay skin. You lift a wooden spoon, scoop a modest thumb's worth, and let it glide into the pot. It melts with a sigh that might be gratitude. The scent deepens, round and steady, as if morning suddenly remembered a story it meant to tell. Through the hatch to the refectory, a draught pulls, then retreats, leaving the kitchen to itself. You listen to heat doing arithmetic with moisture, to water working out its small, important problems, to wood practicing adulthood one ember at a time. The fire asks so little: air, patience, respect. You give it all three and discover you have not diminished. The chimney, at last in a good mood, carries the smoke like a quiet promise upward. A broom whispers along the flagstones behind you, gathering yesterday's flower ghosts and the tiny catastrophes of onion skins. The sound is pleasant, like a letter being unfolded very slowly. Light from the high-slit window pretends to be enough, and almost is. The copper on the wall reflects it in dull coins. You add a second pot for thin beer. Press last summer's hops in a linen bag until your palms remember their stickiness, and lower the bag into warming water. A clean bitterness rises and offers the morning a straight back. Someone sets a small loaf on the table near your elbow, a wordless provision. The crust is the color of walnuts, the crumb shows a modest spring. You break off an ear and leave the rest for the natural kindness of later hunger. Warmth moves up your fingers into your wrists, into the little cold place that pretends to live in your chest. Bread behaves well without instruction. You let it be clever in silence. The fire, having decided to live, wishes to be fed like any creature that has made up its mind. You grant it a third log, one convinced of its destiny. The hearth crackles no applause, just consent. The copper pot gathers a rim of tiny beads, the sort that promise but do not perform. You let them promise. Promises are useful when they remain promises for a while. You lean back on your heels, wipe your hands against a cloth that barely deserves the name, and look at the room as if you had not seen it every day. Soot gathers in unreachable places and will continue to do so until invited to leave. The door stands ajar, a slice of damp morning holding its breath. Heat is here now. It has a quiet shape. It has settled into the stones and into you, and the kitchen answers in the oldest language, which is simply warmth where there was none. The fires have stirred to life. They require nothing dramatic from you, only the steady tenderness of tending. You have given it, and the day is ready to be cooked. You tie the apron smoother across your robe, feel the knot confirm your hands, and stand a little nearer the hearth than necessary, because nearer seems reasonable. Things begin, as they usually do, with flame remembering it is flame. The kitchen grows brighter by inches, not from the sky, but from the slow yielding of the fire. Shadows crawl backward along the wall, retreating from the orange weight of the flames. Along the beams overhead, pots hang in orderly lines, their copper bellies dulled from use, yet showing stubborn circles of polish where rags have argued with soot. You glance at them in turn, a row of silent witnesses to endless stews and breads, each carrying a faint patina of yesterday. The hooks creak faintly when stirred by the draught, and each pot gives a soft, metallic answer. They hang from black iron brackets hammered into beams, so dark with smoke they appear almost carved from shadow. Each pot bears its own personality. One is squat and dented, its side bowed in as if it lost an argument with a careless ladle. Another is tall and thin-necked, proud to be the one chosen for brewing broth that requires patience. A shallow pan, with edges rolled like a curled lip, hangs lower than the rest, ready for quick fryings when oil and onions conspire. You let your hand travel along the row, your fingers grazing the cold rims, The sensation is faintly greasy despite polish, because copper remembers oil even when water forgets. Your reflection wobbles across one of them, distorted, a pale oval wearing a hood. The reflection sways when you move, as though mocking your posture. You smile without smiling, a habit of kitchens where too much expression might smoke the air. The smell of damp logs lessens now, replaced by a more confident heat. Resin loosens from pine, carrying its sharp sweetness up the chimney. The coals shift with small sighs, embers blinking awake, while the kettle nearest the fire begins to chatter. Steam pushes insistently at the lid, but it will wait until someone listens. The room hums with the unremarkable sounds of pots agreeing to work, lids rattling faintly, water shifting against iron, the occasional tick of cooling soot flaking from stone. On the table near the hearth, knives lie in a row, their blades recently rubbed with sand. They gleam with soft reluctance, more practical than proud. Beside them rests a whetstone, damp from its last use, smelling faintly of riverbed. Baskets lean against the wall beneath, filled with yesterday's roots, carrots, parsnips, turnips still clinging to small clots of soil. They wait patiently, knowing they will be peeled, sliced, and softened into something that tastes of patience itself. You pull a stool closer to the table, its legs wobbling slightly where the floor has learned the shape of its weight. The seat is polished from years of robes sliding across it. From here, the copper row above looks like an honor guard, silent and burnished, keeping the dignity of routine. You pick up a rag and rub one of the smaller pots with the easy repetition of someone not trying to improve it, only to remind it that someone cares. The surface clears enough to catch a little glow from the fire, a dull coin brightening at the edge. A voice murmurs behind you, soft enough to be mistaken for thought. It says nothing remarkable, only the inventory of wood and water, but it lingers at your shoulder before drifting away. You nod though the voice is already gone. The copper carries the echo in faint vibrations, as though it too had heard. From the rafters dangle bundles of herbs drying slowly, their stems wrapped in twine. Sage leaves curl into themselves. Thyme crumbles if looked at too sternly. Rosemary needles cling with their stubborn pine scent. They add their own decoration to the kitchen, more honest than banners. The air around them is always slightly seasoned, as if the walls themselves had been steeped. You take a step back from the row of pots and let the view settle into your eyes. The soot, the copper, the wood, the bundles, the fire, each an ordinary piece, each behaving as expected. Yet together they make a sort of silent theatre, one where no audience ever applauds. The play is endless and needs no script. The broom waits propped against the door. The ladles hang in their niche like monks in procession, each one hollowed from wood, worn smooth by the grip of countless hands. Their edges are dark from broth, light from washing, a permanent twilight carved into the grain. You run your hand once more along the rim of the nearest pot, now faintly warm to the touch from the fire's nearness. It hums with its own readiness, though it says nothing. You leave it in place and step aside. Someone else will lift it soon, fill it with broth or water, stir it with measured circles. For now it hangs, polished just enough to remind you that copper, unlike stone, reflects what it sees. The kitchen exhales in rhythm with the flames, and you breathe with it. The smell of soot, resin, damp wool, and drying herbs is no surprise, but still it steadies you. You are where you always are. The copper pots shine faintly against soot-dark beams, holding their modest dignity without comment. You settle at the long table again, where the trough waits with its burden of roots. The wood of the trough is pale where knives have bitten, stained in places with the orange shadow of carrots and the dark rings left by beets. The smell rising from it is not fresh but honest, damp soil, faint sweetness, and the sharp bite of raw turnip. You take the knife closest to hand, its wooden hilt worn thin in the middle, where thumb and finger have agreed to meet for years. You draw the blade across a carrot, the sound soft and fibrous, more like cloth tearing than wood splitting. Orange ribbons curl away, thin and weak, falling into a pile that grows without pride. The root beneath your knife glows faintly with moisture, its scent a reminder of buried places. You work slowly, not because speed is impossible, but because repetition is expected. The pile of peels thickens, the trough fills with cut pieces. The turnip offers a different resistance, denser, heavier, its white flesh showing the faintest trace of purple near the skin. Each cut leaves a firm chunk that rolls across the trough before resting. You smell its bitterness and shrug at it. Pot will change it, fire will tame it, knives are simply the first persuaders. Someone slides another basket onto the table beside you. The wicker creaks, the roots tumble and knock together with muffled thuds. A hand brushes yours in the moment of setting it down, though it could have been avoided. It remains long enough to be noticed, not long enough to be remarked upon. The basket smells of damp reed and soil that has not given up its claim entirely. You return to your cutting. The rhythm is simple. Slice, gather, push, repeat. The sound becomes a steady pattern, filling the air the way plain chant fills the chapel monotone, regular, soothing through its refusal to surprise. The blade dulls slightly against the tough hide of parsnip, and you press harder, hearing the scrape of steel complain faintly. You pause, rub the knife against the whetstone, and return. The sound changes, cleaner, as though the knife is grateful for being remembered. From the hearth comes a low pop as resin surrenders in the log. Smoke wanders lazily through the rafters, curling around the bundles of drying sage. You feel its presence settle in your sleeve, leaving the faint smell of wood fire that you know will travel with you to prayer and to rest. The onion pile waits, and you choose one, its skin papery and loud when peeled back. The smell rises, strong and immediate, pricking your eyes as if reminding you not to take anything lightly. Tears sting without passion, only as a bodily fact. You slice thin rings, your knife keeping time with your breathing. Each cut makes a pale circle that collapses into the trough, adding its sharp perfume to the growing chorus of earth and root. You pause to rub your hand along the edge of the trough. It is smooth from centuries of this same work, grooves pressed deeper by the labor of hands you will never know. The wood accepts your palm without protest, offering only its cool, firm presence. You add the last onion to the pile and push the cuttings toward the side, making space for the next basket. A small loaf of yesterday's bread waits on the corner of the table. Its crust is hard, cracked like dry clay. You break off a piece, chew it slowly. The taste is flat but steady, softened by the steam rising from the pots nearby. Someone hums under their breath across the room, not a tune you recognize, not even a melody, more the sound of voice filling silence without purpose. The note rises and falls, then fades. You keep your eyes on the knife and let the sound join the rhythm of your cutting until it dissolves. You glance at the pile of sliced roots, orange, white, pale green, streaked with purple. They lie together without order, waiting to be softened into sameness. Your knife rests across the trough, its blade catching the glow from the fire in a dull shimmer. Your hands, roughened by wool and work, smell now of soil, onion, and the faint sweetness of carrot. You rub them together absently, as if the smell might lessen. It does not. A draught slips through the open doorway, carrying the cool scent of rain-soaked stone from the courtyard. The fire bends slightly, then steadies. Your hair stirs under your hood. You do not move. You let the air wash past, leaving goose flesh along your wrists. You return to your task, lifting another root, placing it against the trough, guiding the knife down its length. Each movement is deliberate. Each piece falls as expected. Nothing hurries. Nothing asks for more than the next cut. The trough fills steadily, roots layered like chapters in a book no one will read, but everyone will eat. You look at them, you breathe in their earthy chorus, and you understand that this is enough for the morning. Knife, trough, roots, the sound of cutting, the smell of soil becoming food. You carry the basket of peelings to the doorway and pause there because the courtyard always asks for a moment. Rain no longer falls with conviction. It performs the careful drip that follows labor. The air tastes of wet stone and a little iron, as if the roof has soaked overnight and now gives back what it borrowed. You step beneath the cloister arch and let the cool fold over your warmed sleeves. Water gathers along the eaves, counts to 3 in a language of beads. and let's go into the waiting barrels with small, agreeable sounds. The cloister walk lays out a long rectangle of restraint. Moss scribbles at the edges of the paving stones, writing the same polite sentence in every corner. Puddles hold thin ovals of sky and do not spill them. You move slowly along the arcade, basket against your hip, and listen to a faithful arrangement of small noises. Water ticking on wood, a dove muttering under the roof, sandals far away keeping their measured counsel. The rain, undecided about being weather anymore, has promoted itself to punctuation. You tilt your face toward the open square and feel soft pins of wet touch your skin. They do not soak, they inform. Across from you, the kitchen chimney lifts a thin thread of smoke that refuses straightness and wanders along the tiles as if reviewing them. You know that smoke onion, fat, a hint of last summer's hops, so even from here it arrives like a familiar voice carried thinly through rooms. You breathe it in and let it sit politely behind your ribs. At the first barrel, the rim is slick with algae, a thoughtful green that does not apologize. Water rounds itself at the lip, hesitates, and drops with a note that lands in your bones as much as in the barrel. You tip the peelings into the compost trench beside it, and turn the heap with the old fork, its tines bent like teeth remembering different directions. Steam rises where the heat of rot keeps its own season. The smell is assertive. The rain, a sensible creature, stands a little farther off, and minding its rain business. You lean against a column. The stone is cold, which is its personality. Tiny ferns cling in the seams. A snail writes a spiral opinion near the base, taking all the time in the world because it has declined to own a bell. From here you can see the refectory door, half closed, the kitchen hatch, half open, and the herb beds where sage and rue pretend that string has made them orderly. Rain beads on their leaves and then reluctantly jumps, as if nudged by a shy finger. A hooded figure crosses the square with a pail, walking at the pace appointed for pails and mornings and rain. The sandal finds the shallowest part of a puddle and accepts the small consequence. The pail gives a modest slosh, corrects itself, and continues. You watch without intending to, which is the best way to watch. At the far barrel, water is tipped in. The figure stands very still for an unnecessary heartbeat, and then returns along the same line of stone. When the steps pass your arch, a sleeve lingers near yours, wool nearly, almost, brushing wool, then continues as though the air had made its own choice. The roof drips perform variations. From the north side you get a steady metronome, from the east a polite stutter, from the corner where a proud tile believes it is slightly different from its neighbours, you get a hesitant triplet that refuses to resolve. It is a concert for patient ears. You listen because listening is easier than not. The archers keep time by doing nothing at all. Near the well, a bench holds a coil of rope, damp and obedient. You sit and let the damp consider your robe until it becomes bored. The courtyard offers a breath of crushed mint from somewhere it was not instructed to grow. A bee arrives to examine the rumour, decides against it, and buzzes on toward the rosemary, which accepts the inspection and keeps its counsel. Rain beads on your eyelashes and makes the view a little like looking through boiled sugar. An old bucket near the laundry shed overfills by one stubborn finger's width and chooses not to notice. The spill runs down in a thin sheet that catches the small light and lays it gently on the stone. You follow that thread with your eyes to the drain where the iron grate remembers every winter and every spring and bears them without conversation. It ticks when a larger drop finds it, a tiny announcement to no one in particular. The sound suits the morning and the morning suits the sound. Beyond the arches, garden beds hold their outlines like stitched hem. The cabbages collect water in layered cups that tip with the slightest breeze. A blackbird tests the softened soil, tugging at something that resists with admirable manners. The bird wins, as birds do, and hops away with its prize, leaving the earth to rearrange its face. The rain approves by doing nothing differently. You nod in quiet agreement with that decision. You push your hood back and let your hair drink the air, which is the closest thing to a luxury the courtyard allows. The rain thins again, becoming the mere idea of rain. Inside somewhere, The bell offers a single conversational note, not a call, only proof that the bell has not forgotten itself. The sound wanders across the arches, taps each column, and fades into the herb bed as if it might take root. You let it settle politely and disturb nothing. A water trail runs down the column where you lean. It draws a thin map over stone, a country of runnels and tiny fjords, a peninsula of grit, an estuary where the drop pauses to admire its choices. Your finger follows a thumb's breadth of it, and then declines to continue, because this map is better when it makes itself. The stone accepts your touch and remains stone, which is a consistency you can respect. Your palm keeps a small print of cold for a few slow breaths. Footsteps return, slow and soft, a little uneven on the wet flags, because the flags prefer that you think about them. You do think about them. When the steps level with your bench, they pause for the same unnecessary heartbeat as before. Water from the eaves releases 3 quick drops that strike the nearest barrel with 3 different notes, like a child trying out an instrument before being shushed. The pause ends, the steps go on. The bench keeps its knowledge without changing shape. You rise and walk the long side of the cloister, counting arches the way one counts stitches. At the corner, you touch the carved capital where a vine curls in a style that has never met a real vine. A small pool rests in the stone leaf and tips gently when you pass. Your sleeve gathers a darker spot it will carry for an hour as proof that it was here. You consider this stain a perfect record. Rain met sleeve, sleeve complied, day proceeded. Back near the kitchen hatch, the world smells warmer. From inside, a spoon moves around a pot with the circular patience of clouds. You set the empty basket by the door and stand under the arch again, pleased to be neither outside nor inside. The barrels continue their quiet conversation with the eaves. The gutters settle their minor politics. The courtyard breathes like a careful animal. The rain finishes its remarks and folds itself away. You take one more slow breath. It tastes of rosemary and smoke and the iron tinge of the roof's opinion. Your hands, cooled by the air, still remember the hour of knife and trough. The brushed nearness of a moment ago lingers like warmth near your elbow, but the courtyard is very good at teaching everything to be the same temperature. You agree to be the same temperature too. You step back toward the kitchen door, letting the arch release you. Behind you, the barrels keep on with their patient counting. Ahead, the room waits with its fire behaving itself and its pots considering their day. The cloister returns to being a frame for weather, and you carry the quiet with you because it has attached itself very lightly to your robe. You return to the kitchen where warmth has gathered itself in small pools near the hearth. The door closes behind you with a muffled wooden sigh, leaving the courtyard's dripping patience outside. Here the air thickens with the calm insistence of yeast and flour. On the table sits the linen-draped mound that was only powder and water yesterday, now risen into something breathing slowly under cloth. You place your hand gently on the fabric. The linen is slightly damp where moisture has pushed upward, and beneath it, the dough presses back with a kind of modest pride. You lift the corner and let the pale, swollen surface greet the light. It is smooth in places, bubbled in others, freckles of flour clinging to it like dust on stone. The smell is faintly sour, faintly sweet, familiar as a robe's fold after years of wear. You press a finger lightly into it. The indentation lingers, then sighs back, slow and forgiving. The yeast has done its work, invisible but insistent, turning silence into air. You imagine the bowl as a small lung, rising through the night without song, shaping itself in darkness while rain tapped the roof. Beside it rests a crock of flour, the rim white with spills, the cloth cover tied with rough twine. You scatter a pinch across the board and let the dust float briefly before settling. It smells like nothing and everything. Field, threshing, storage loft, handprint. You pull the dough free, its weight shifting with a faint slurp, strands stretching and breaking. It lands on the board with the sigh of a creature that knows where it belongs. You fold it slow and rhythmic. Each push of the heel of your palm presses air out. Each fold draws it back in. The surface tightens, then relaxes, then tightens again, like breathing in stone time. You find a pace that matches the small hum of the chimney, a pattern of pressure and release that is almost chant without words. The room smells richer now, flour joining smoke and onion. From the rafters above, a crumb of dried thyme drops into the board. It lies there without embarrassment until your hand brushes it aside. The dough absorbs what it will, remembers nothing else. You pause to dust your hands, watching flour powder drift into the firelight like a faded blessing. It settles across your sleeves and turns the wool paler. You do not shake it off. You let it remain as proof. Another figure moves nearby, wordless, carrying a jug of water from the barrel. The jug is set carefully on the bench, a soft clink against wood. The dough stretches under your hands again, and for a breath you feel the air shift at your side, the weight of presence without any declaration. The jug stays, the figure moves away, and only the faint slosh of water remains to mark the moment. You shape the dough into rounds, each one imperfect, each one obedient to gravity. You set them on a floured cloth, the linen sagging into a gentle hammock beneath their weight. They rest, not yet bread, only the idea of it. The oven will finish their lesson later. For now they swell slowly, as if listening to something you cannot hear. The peel leans against the wall, blackened from years of carrying heat. You rest your hand on its handle, smooth from palms, splinters long since taught to behave. It is a tool that remembers thousands of loaves, each one risen under its steady patience. You set it back where it waits. The pot on the hearth shifts into a gentle boil, bubbles lifting at the edges and releasing the smell of onions softened into sweetness. You stir with a wooden spoon, and the circle you draw in the broth mirrors the circle you pressed into the dough with your palms. Both are small repetitions that make the day behave. The loaves under cloth rise again, quietly, slowly, pushing against linen with a modest pride. You fold the corners over them, as though tucking children for sleep. The cloth darkens where it touches, damp with their breath. You sit a moment, hands folded in your lap, and watch the steam rise from pot and dough alike. The kitchen hums its low hymn of fire and yeast. It needs no witness, but you are here, so you let your eyes soften, your breath slow, and your shoulders rest under the robe's weight. Bread will come later. For now, you keep it company. The stew pot waits on the trivet, its rim beaded with steam. You lift the lid with the edge of a cloth, and the breath that escapes fogs your lashes. It smells of onion, of carrots softening into sweetness, of turnip surrendering its stubbornness to heat. The air thickens with that smell, winding itself around rafters, pressing into wool, clinging to your skin in a way no washing later will erase. You stir slowly with the long-handled spoon, the circle wide and deliberate. Each turn feels like drawing a wheel on water, slow, even, without destination. The broth swirls, pale bubbles rising like tired thoughts. The spoon's wood darkens where it touches liquid, and its rim creaks faintly in your grip. Your hand warms from the steam, your wrist damp, your face tingling with heat. You add another scoop of roots from the trough. They fall into the broth with dull splashes, settling, then floating up again like half-forgotten ideas. You press them down with the spoon until they agree to stay. A thread of rosemary follows, flicked from a bundle overhead. Its sharp scent pricks through the heavy air for an instant, then softens, hiding among the onions. Around you, the kitchen is quieter than it looks. A ladle clinks against a hook. A log shifts with a faint crackle. Farther down the table, someone hums half a note and lets it dissolve. The stew becomes the center of sound, the occasional bubble rising, the whisper of the spoon moving in circles. You lean closer, letting your cheek take the steam. It settles into your hood, dampening the cloth until it clings. The heat feels like hands pressing gently against your face, not in comfort, not in scolding, simply in presence. Your breath carries the taste of broth before it ever reaches your lips. You pause, lifting the spoon high enough to let broth slip back into the pot in a thin stream. The sound is a soft ribbon, breaking surface and vanishing. Droplets cling to the spoon's edge, trembling before they fall. You watch them longer than needed. A second pot sits nearby, empty but waiting. You drag it closer and dip the ladle, transferring broth with slow care. The ladle scrapes softly, metal against copper, and you pour without hurry, as if broth prefers time to air. The second pot sighs when it receives the liquid, as though grateful for being included. The hearth crackles, sending sparks upward. Smoke curls along the stones before deciding on the chimney. You stir again, not to move food, but to remind yourself that circles have no beginning or end. The steam thickens your hair, flattening it against your forehead. You wipe your brow with the cloth, dampened now not only by broth but by your own patient sweat. Another hand joins yours briefly at the pot's rim, steadying it as you lean with the spoon. The touch is quick, almost incidental, but it leaves a trace of warmth against your knuckle. The hand withdraws, and the spoon continues its circle as though nothing interrupted it. Still, the broth seems to taste a little richer after. You taste with the tip of the spoon, lips barely brushing wood. It is thin, but honest. Salt enough, sweetness beginning, bitterness fading. The kind of stew that nourishes without boasting. You swallow slowly, letting warmth slip into your chest. You breathe out, and the steam makes your exhale visible, mingling with the pot's own breath. The vegetables soften more with each circle. The broth thickens, gathering their surrender into itself. The smell settles deeper into the room, into the beams, into your robe, into your skin. You imagine carrying it with you to the cell later, to the bench, even to the dream. It will not leave, and you do not ask it to. The stewpot murmurs in agreement, bubble after bubble breaking the surface like small confessions. You stir, you breathe, you watch, you wait. That is all, and it is enough. You stack the cabbage heads in a careful pyramid that knows better than to trust itself. The leaves are cold from the courtyard, their ribs stiff with last night's weather. Tiny beads of water lodge in the crinkles like clear seeds and roll down your sleeve when you lift them. The smell is clean and large raw green. A little earth, a little bitterness, that declares it will be useful once heat teaches it manners. The baskets crowd the table end, wicker shoulders against wicker shoulders, each with its own faint creak when shifted. You wedge a heel of stale bread beneath one so it will stop wobbling, and the basket accepts the correction with a patient hush. Somewhere above, a draught finds a gap and lays a thin finger of coolness across the nape of your neck. The hearth answers with a comforting exhale, as if to remind the draught who has seniority. You tilt a cabbage and begin to peel its tired outer leaves. They sigh away with soft resistance, the sound like cloth unbuttoned by someone trying not to wake a room. The inner leaves show themselves paler, tighter, still folded around their own intentions. You trim the stem, feel the knife notch its memory into the wood, then lay the head on its side and send the blade through with the slow respect due to stubborn vegetables and old bones. The halves fall open and release a clean scent that cuts through onion and smoke like a bell offered to a quiet chapel. Beyond the baskets, where the table turns toward the wall, voices begin the smallest conversation. Not voices, exactly air given shape and then taken back, as if the room were practicing words it does not wish to own. They sift through the cabbages in brief threads, gather at the edge of your hearing, and unspool before they can be named. You do not lean. Leaning is a kind of question, and questions are noisy. You keep the knife where it belongs, your eyes on pale ribs and green veining. More salt, says one of the murmurs, though the phrase arrives as if it had been travelling for days and is perfectly content to arrive late. Less time, says the other, but it is a kind of smile disguised as measure. The wicker flexes once, lightly. A leaf rustles, the precise sound of a thumb learning a margin. You lift another outer layer and let it slip to the floor, where it lands like a soft bird that has remembered it prefers the ground. You scrape the pale shavings into a bowl. They pile loosely, curls within curls, nothing heavy enough to commit to its own weight. The bowl smells faintly of last week's brine, a memory of vinegar and peppercorns that refuses to give up entirely to washing. Your hands grow cold as you work, and your fingertips shine where cabbage water has made small glosses across the skin. The murmurs pause. A breath is set down, then picked up again. The oven, says the first, but very quietly. as if the oven might be embarrassed by attention. After the bell says the second, and you hear the smile again, a shape that lives in the corners of the mouth and thinks no one notices. The baskets do an admirable job of being baskets. They are excellent at blocking lines of sight while pretending not to try. You set a handful of cut ribbons aside, reach for the crock of salt, lift a deliberate pinch, and let it fall like winter across green. The leaves squeak under your hands when you press, yielding a little water, as if reminded of what they carried out of the garden. Your palms smell now of cold brassica and clean brine. You rub your hands on your apron and keep the motion unimportant. The murmurs are not a secret if no one has asked for them. They are only smaller parts of the air. A fly, convinced of its own patience, traces a lazy script around the rim of the bowl and is guided away by the back of your knuckle. It leaves without taking offense. Beyond the wicker, a light laugh is allowed and then closed. A cupboard door eased shut with 2 fingers. Wood ticks in the fire. A spoon touches the side of a pot and makes a small bell out of copper. The kitchen performs its daily plain chant without rehearsal. You shuffle the baskets further along the table, creating a lane of sight that could exist by accident. It shows only elbows and the slope of a shoulder under wool. The elbow pauses near a bundle of dill, reconsidering. The shoulder leans a hairbreadth farther than necessity, and then returns to the limits written by habit and stone. A single green stem is lifted from the bundle and weighed not for its flavour, but for its noticeability. It is replaced. A sprig of thyme is chosen instead, which has fewer opinions. You fetch the small knife you use when the large knife has said enough. It feels like a whisper in your hand, blade the length of your thumb, handle polished by anxious work. You trim the thick ribs from the leaves and lay them aside for the pigs, who do not stand on ceremony. The pile of usable greens grows to an argument that can be resolved with heat and time. The murmurs take up the careful business of discussing nothing. Barrels offers one. Lids replies the other. They could be arranging the world or arranging a moment. It is not your business. Your business is the cabbage, the knife, the brine, the bowl that remembers other mornings. You salt again, and your knuckles whiten in the press, and the leaves soften with small squeals of surrender. Someone passes behind you and steadies the basket you are no longer pretending to watch. The touch arrives only as a change in the wicker's sound, less complaint, more agreement. The smell that is not exactly rosemary and not exactly wool drifts across your shoulder and then chooses to live elsewhere. A strand of hair at your temple decides to notice the air and rises slightly, then chooses modesty and lies down again. You turn the cut leaves with both hands, lifting and letting them fall so they can settle more compactly. The bowl grows heavy, and you shift its weight closer to your body like a child returned from play. Your hip meets the table edge. The table accepts the news. Your hands, green-fringed now, look like hands that belong to this work, and not to any other. The hearth gives a small cluck of satisfaction when a bubble in the stew finds a way to speak. A scrap of conversation escapes the baskets, thin as a breath through linen. Tonight, it says, which is not a plan so much as a place on a clock that nobody owns. If the bell allows, says the other, a line of humility that is not entirely humble. A leaf slides from your palm, hesitates at the rim, and then chooses the bowl again. You remind yourself that cabbage is not a witness. It is supper. You look toward the high window, where the light has deepened from pewter to dull tin. The change is not dramatic, which is the point. The room adjusts to the day by degrees and expects gratitude to match. You oblige with a breath that tastes of brine and hearth. The baskets wait, cabbage shoulders nearly touching. Excellent listeners. You carry the bowl to the bench by the hearth and set it there so the leaves can warm into their next selves. The heat strokes the rim, draws a little more water from the greens, and returns a scent that softens the line of your mouth without asking. You rinse your hands in the basin, the water grey from many mornings, and wipe them on a cloth that will never be truly clean again and has made peace with that. When you return to the table, the space beyond the baskets is empty. in the way a page is empty after a sentence ends. The dill is missing one small sprig, not a theft, an adjustment. The time shows a neat gap that would escape the attention of anyone who has not made a habit of noticing middles. The wicker has stopped creaking. The air is content with being air. You set another cabbage on the board. Feel its weight argue briefly with your wrist, and begin to peel again. The outer leaves depart with polite resignation. The inner leaves promise usefulness. Somewhere to your right, a breath enters and leaves a body without commentary. In the stew, a carrot announces its softness and then declines further speech. The kitchen, pleased with the level of attention it is receiving, continues to be exactly itself. You keep your eyes on the green, your hands in the brine, your ears on the kitchen, the way ears learn to be on kitchens. The murmurs among the cabbage leaves have gone wherever murmurs go when they are finished. Perhaps they join the steam as it climbs. Perhaps they hide between pages of the day when no one bothers to read. You do not look for them. You cut, you salt, you press, you breathe. The bowl grows heavy again, and the room returns to its steady business, having briefly entertained the idea of being more interesting than usual, and then wisely chosen not to be. The spice jars sit along the high shelf, each capped with a wooden stopper worn smooth by many twistings. The row resembles a congregation, silent and expectant, each jar keeping its secrets in plain sight. Clay, glass, wood, whatever vessel was available when it was needed. Dust has settled around their bases like a fine border, unbothered by cloths that pass it by. You reach for the nearest, a clay jar still damp at the rim from morning's humidity. It holds dried marjoram, though it looks like nothing more than brittle fragments of leaf. The smell, once freed, rises sharp and green, cutting through the dull heaviness of boiling root. You pinch a small measure between your fingers and let it fall into the pot. It floats a moment before vanishing, its work hidden but assured. Your hand continues along the shelf, fingers brushing each jar, as if they were prayer beads. Caraway, coriander, dill seeds, a lonely pinch of saffron folded in waxed paper, treasured but rarely touched. Each carries its own history, its own chain of hands that brought it here. Merchants crossing mountains, peddlers muttering promises in marketplaces, brothers trading favors with kitchens in distant cloisters. All that effort now sits quietly on a shelf in a smoke-streaked kitchen, waiting to be pinched and stirred. Another hand reaches at the same time, from the other side. The sleeves brush first, wool on wool, dry and familiar. Fingers pause just beside yours, both sets hovering above the same jar of coriander. A silence gathers around the shelf, heavier than spice, lighter than air. Neither hand withdraws. The jar is lifted, not by one, but by two hands, yours and not yours, tilting slightly, steadied together. The stopper creaks free, and the smell of citrus and wood rises, sharper than onion, softer than fire. For a moment, the air is something different, brighter, expectant, like a door half open. You tip a few seeds into your palm. They roll, small and hard, clicking faintly like beads on stone. The other hand takes only two, no more, no less. They are lifted with care and scattered into the pot beside yours. The sound is nearly silent, but you hear it as clearly as the bell. The jar is returned to the shelf, both hands guiding it back to its dust circle. Fingers withdraw at the same time, as though following a rule. The sleeves part, each cloth falling into its own gravity again. The coriander scent remains, a thin thread weaving through steam, refusing to vanish. You take the spoon and stir slowly, folding the seeds into broth already heavy with onion and cabbage. The spoon makes the same patient circle, wood scraping wood at the rim of the pot. The seeds crack gently, releasing what they were meant to. The broth accepts them without question, turning slightly darker, slightly more itself. The figure beside you lingers only long enough to check the lid of another jar. A sprig of dill, dried nearly to dust, is lifted and set carefully back. No words, only the faint scrape of clay against wood as the jar is replaced. The sleeve brushes yours again, whether by need or by chance, and then the space is empty, filled only by steam and smoke. You breathe through your nose and let the coriander rest in your lungs. It sits there like a quiet visitor, polite but noticeable. The pot resumes its low murmur, bubbles rising in no hurry, each one a soft punctuation mark in the kitchen's long sentence. On the shelf, the jars stand as before, though now the coriander seems to lean forward slightly, proud of having been chosen. The dust has not moved, the stoppers have not changed, yet you know something has shifted and you know it will not be written down. You wipe your hands on your apron, though they are not dirty. The smell of coriander lingers on your fingertips, warm and citrus, sharper than the cloth can hide. You rest your hands on the table, palms open, and the room feels heavier, richer, as though a secret has been folded into its very air. You linger by the hearth longer than the task requires. The oven's open mouth radiates its low breath across your shins, coaxing warmth into your bones. You should move, there are roots to salt, dishes to wash, but your hands rest against the apron's folds and refuse to argue. The air here is heavy with the fat sigh of logs, the sleepy churn of cabbage and carrot in broth, and the faint resin of rosemary. It holds you in place like a chair with no legs. The fire bends toward you when you lean closer, its glow painting the inside of your robe. Sparks travel upward, then vanish, ashamed of their briefness. The oven stones hum with a steadiness that seeps into you if you stand still long enough. It is an invitation with no words, no promises, only heat reminding you it has survived many dawns. Your palms spread toward the blaze, closer than needed. The heat presses back, firm but gentle, warming your knuckles, reddening the skin. You trace small circles above the flame, pretending to test the temperature, though you are not. The warmth pulls inside your sleeves, climbs up your forearms, rests in your shoulders like a cat making itself at home. Behind you, feet shuffle. A basin clinks. The broom sighs over the flagstones. The kitchen is awake in its usual way, but the space here at the hearth feels set apart, claimed by warmth alone. You remain longer, your shadow growing and shrinking against the wall with each breath of the fire. Then it happens, not planned, not spoken. Another robe stops beside yours, just long enough to feel the oven's heat. Wool brushes wool. Two sets of hands rest on the same invisible border between flame and air. Your elbows do not touch, but they listen to each other. The silence thickens, not heavy, not loud, only stretched. The other sleeve lifts slightly as if testing the heat more honestly than you have. The hand stays too near yours for too long, though not long enough to break the rule of accident. The glow paints both wrists the same color. Neither pulls away. A ladle clatters behind you. Someone laughs quietly, not about you, but the sound reminds the room it is not empty. The sleeve beside you withdraws slowly, almost reluctantly, and then finds something useful to do at the table. You are left with the hearth, with its loyal warmth, with your palms still spread, as though they were waiting for more. You close your hands and lower them, folding fingers into fists that soften quickly again. The fire, indifferent, continues its small applause against the logs. You step back half a pace, letting cool air find your face. The warmth clings a while longer before loosening its grip. On the bench nearby, chestnuts crackle in their shells where they've been set to roast. Their smell is nutty, sweet, promising a later moment. You watch the shells split along their scored lines, steam escaping in thin threads. It reminds you that even the hardest things soften when they sit by fire long enough. You move at last, carrying a log to the woodpile, not because the hearth asked for it, but because movement gives your hands something to believe in. You set it down with more care than necessary. The oven's glow follows you, warming your back as you turn. You let it fade slowly, carrying the echo in your robe, your skin, your breath. The fire stays where it is, doing what it always does. But you know that for one moment, longer than needed, you both stood nearer than the work required. The heat will not tell anyone. The smoke will keep its silence. The oven has seen too much to bother remembering. You discover the small heel of bread where someone has left it on the bench by the hearth, the crust as dark as walnut shell, the crumb showing its day-old honesty. It is no offering. It is simply here, which is how most things arrive. You turn it in your hand and feel the coarseness against your palm, the slow give of the inside, the toughness at the edge where heat has made its case. The smell is a quiet mixture of flour, ash, and yesterday's steam, still patient in the pores. You do not bite at once. You set the crust on the board and steady it with your thumb. A knife would be decisive, but the moment prefers fingers, so you bend the heel and listen to the small crack along its back. The crumb opens reluctantly, giving you two pieces that are not equal and do not pretend to be. You keep the larger because you are the one breaking, which is an old rule, and you are confident no one will complain. Around you, the kitchen continues its slow arithmetic. The pot accepts its own bubbles, counts them, and loses track in a comforting way. The oven gives a long, warm breath that does not ask to be named. A ladle touches a rim. A broom writes a thin line on the floor and then erases it. You put the smaller piece of bread aside where it might be overlooked, which of course means it will not be. You chew with the modest rhythm that suits dry crust. Teeth do their work. The jaw obeys. The crumb softens with the kindness of steam still hanging in the room. You tilt your head toward the hearth and let the warmth meet your cheek because it has offered. The taste is plain and decent, like a sentence without adjectives. You have no quarrel with it. A shadow leans on the table opposite. Not much of a shadow, just a slight interruption in the light where the oven's glow meets the bench. A sleeve hovers, then pretends to adjust a jar, then discovers that it has no reason to be here, and somehow remains. You glance at the smaller piece you broke and find yourself amused at how it has begun to look like a plan. You lift it and hold it in your palm as if judging weight. You are very fair. The sleeve lowers. A hand appears, palm up, the briefest cupboard open to air. You could place the crust there now and call it done. You do not. You turn it once more in your fingers until the crumbs make a small constellation along your skin. Then you set it into the waiting palm and make sure your fingers take a little longer than courtesy would recommend. The hand does not close right away. The crust sits there as if it has been invited to think. When the fingers fold at last, your knuckle meets the soft crease at the base of the thumb. It is not a touch with a name. It is simply the geometry of bread and hand and the foolishness of narrow benches. Still, the point of contact remembers itself. The crust leaves a few crumbs behind as it goes, marking your palm as if you had touched a small map and stolen a village. The other hand moves away. The sleeve straightens. The jar discovers that it truly did need straightening, and the crust vanishes along the line of the bench. You wipe the crumbs from your palm onto the board. They fall without noise and join the practical dust of flour that never entirely leaves. A wisp of steam brushes your face from the pot, which chooses this moment to remind everyone of onions. You take another bite of your own piece and find it improved somehow, though the bread has not changed since the last mouthful. You break off a smaller corner and offer it to the stew to soften. It accepts gladly, darkening along its edges, taking up broth like a modest sponge. When you lift it out, the bread leans toward falling apart and decides against it. You place it on your tongue and let the flavors assemble themselves with no hurry. Onion settled into sweetness, turnip almost polite, a breath of coriander you are not thinking about. Across the table, the hand that is not yours sets an empty bowl near the trivet, as if bowls have always chosen that particular spot. The crust is no longer visible, which is a fact so ordinary it deserves nothing but agreement. The bowl's rim flashes a dull ring of wear that the fire picks out and then forgets. Your eyes do the same. You pour thin beer from the second pot into a small mug, its clay lip chipped into a map of bays and headland. The steam carries the gentle bitterness of hops, the kind that straightens a back so it can return to bending. You drink and feel the warmth spread across your chest with the manners of a guest who knows not to speak first. On the board, your piece of bread grows smaller. You tear another bite and place it against the stew's breath to take on a little warmth. The bite waits there and becomes easy to chew. You think of nothing helpful and find that restful. A basket at your elbow tips slightly and needs a hand to right it. The hand arrives at the same instant as yours. You lift together, and the wicker stops complaining. Fingers, both sets, remain a heartbeat too near the same handle, then discover other occupations in perfectly opposite directions. The basket sits chastened and grateful, if baskets can be said to have such opinions. You return the mug to the bench, where it leaves a faint ring like a pale moon on oiled wood. The ring will fade when the heat forgets it. Some marks are sensible. You brush the board clear with the side of your hand and collect the crumbs with the back of your knife, letting them fall into your palm. They are small, unambitious, easy to lose. You tip them into the pot, not enough to matter, enough to have happened. Someone in the doorway sneezes and apologizes to no one. The oven offers its steady quiet. The stew, relieved of the weight of rawness, begins to sound content. You take the last portion of your crust, press it once between finger and thumb, and feel the hard edge soften simply because you asked it to. You eat it and decide that bread knows more than it ever says. On the bench across from you, a thumb brushes a lower lip quickly, collecting what might be a crumb or might be nothing at all. A sleeve smooths itself. A small sound that is nearly a laugh manages to be only a breath. The world bravely continues. You rinse your hands in the basin, water cold enough to be admired. The chill tightens your skin. The scent of bread remains anyway, quietly installed among onion, smoke and wool. You dry your hands on a cloth that has given up its youth. Your palms, now clean, remember the warmth of another palm as if it had been a handled mug. The memory finds a shelf and sits there with the spices, behaving. You sweep the board with a rag. The crumbs depart like polite guests who were never certain they were invited. The rag smells faintly of lye and a long campaign against permanent stains. You place it back on its peg, where it pretends to dry. The pot calls for one last turn of the spoon, so you give it. The circle, dependable as ever, erases what it draws. You look at the empty space on the bench where the smaller piece of crust used to be, and you admire it for its emptiness. It has done its job. So have you. You take up the ladle, you take up the bowl, and you take up the day again, all with the same hand. The kitchen accepts your renewed usefulness with its usual grace. The passing of a crust was nothing, which is why it will be remembered. You return to the chopping block, its surface grooved and scarred from years of knives explaining themselves. The board smells of oak and onion, the kind of perfume that never leaves even when scrubbed with lye. You lay down another carrot, its orange skin dulled by soil, and set the knife against it. The blade rises, falls, rises again, each stroke steady, measured, inevitable. The pieces gather in a small pile, modest and quiet, waiting for broth. When you pause to shift the pile into a bowl, your eyes travel without intention across the block to the opposite side. There, another knife works with the same rhythm, though the strokes are slightly slower, slightly more thoughtful, as though the vegetables deserved conversation. You glance quickly and then look back at your own work, but in that blink of time, your eyes have met other eyes. The glance was brief, yet it stays, as stubborn as onion scent on skin. The knife continues its work because knives do not wait for thoughts. You slice a parsnip, pale flesh streaked with faint veins, each cut releasing a bitter tang that fills the air between you and the other side of the board. The sound of chopping overlaps your rhythm, their rhythm two patterns running side by side, blending into one cadence, then slipping apart again. You pretend to study the root, they pretend to study the herb sprigs scattered near their elbow. The block between you carries small evidence. Crumbs of dill cling to a damp corner. A sprig of thyme has rolled to the middle, caught between knives as though it were undecided. Your hand reaches to brush it away at the same moment the other hand does. The sprig is lifted by two fingers, then released quickly, as if guilty of nothing but existing. You clear your throat, though there is no reason. They tap the knife twice against the wood, a rhythm that could mean everything or nothing. The silence afterward grows wider, filled with the sound of knives striking root, root yielding to steel, wood catching the blow. Steam drifts from the pot on the hearth, carrying warmth across the block. It curls upward and hangs between faces, blurring the air. You wipe your brow with the back of your wrist, and in the blur you see eyes again, lifted from the work, holding yours for 1 second too long. You lower your gaze to the block, but the heat of the glance lingers on your cheek like firelight. A cabbage leaf falls from the pile, gliding slowly to the floor. Both of you lean at once. Your fingertips brush against theirs just above the leaf. The contact is dry, fleeting, but unmistakable. You both retrieve your hands as if the leaf had burned you, leaving it to rest where it landed. The moment closes with a knife striking root again, louder this time, as though to seal the air. You place the chopped roots into the waiting bowl, sliding them across with the flat of the knife. The other hand does the same, the bowls filling together, 2 heaps of food side by side. The steam thickens, clouding the edges of sight, making the chopping block feel smaller than it is. You pause once more, knife tip resting in a groove. The grooves are many deep lines from countless mornings, from knives wielded by hands that never noticed who else stood across from them, yet your hand hesitates there, caught in a mark carved by another life. You look up again, just long enough to see their knife also stilled, their eyes lifted, waiting, matching your hesitation. And then, as if in quiet agreement, both knives resume at once, steel against root, root against wood. The sound is steady again, ordinary again, as though nothing at all has happened. But the chopping block knows otherwise, and so do you. You take up the wooden yoke, its curve polished where shoulders have borne it for years. 2 buckets hang from iron hooks, their staves swollen from long acquaintance with water. You lift them and feel the strain travel into your back, a reminder that carrying is slower than filling. The buckets knock against your knees as you walk, sloshing faintly with each uneven stone underfoot. The path from the kitchen to the well is lined with puddles, each holding a small pale sky. You step between them, though the sandals welcome dampness without protest. The courtyard air is cool and smells of wet moss and faint ash drifting from the chimney. A crow complains from the roof beam, then decides silence is easier. At the well you set the buckets down, the iron handles clanging against stone. The rope is coarse against your palms, leaving traces of hemp dust on your skin. You lower the bucket, hearing it creak as the pulley groans in sympathy. The sound of wood and rope together is older than you, and shows no interest in being improved. The bucket touches water with a hollow slap, then sinks. You feel the weight shift suddenly as it fills. You haul it up, the rope pressing hard into your hand, your shoulder tightening with the effort. When the bucket emerges, water spills over its edge and trickles down the outside in thin silver lines. You set it down and repeat, the second bucket following the first with the same tired song. Now full, the buckets swing heavy from the yoke. You settle it across your shoulders, the wood biting a little, and begin the slow walk back. The buckets sway, their surfaces trembling with each step, catching bits of sky and bits of wall, spilling neither. You walk in time with the weight, letting your stride adjust to their pendulum. Halfway across the courtyard, another figure joins your side, carrying nothing. Their pace matches yours without effort. The silence between you is filled with the steady sound of water shifting in wood. You glance sideways without turning your head, and the corner of your vision notes the robe, the sleeve, the quiet company. The stones are uneven here, worn into dips by many feet. Your left bucket strikes lightly against theirs, though they do not carry one. The sound is hollow, wood to wool, no harm done. Still, the echo of that touch hangs in your ears longer than the sound itself. At the cloister walk, you both pause beneath the arch. You rest the yoke on the ground and roll your shoulders, feeling the ache bloom then fade. The other hand reaches out to steady one bucket as it settles, though it needed no help. The hand lingers half a breath too long on the iron handle, then withdraws as if reminded. You lift the yoke again. The buckets slosh their complaint, but you manage them into the kitchen where the fire greets you with its warm breath. You set the water down by the hearth, filling the air with the clean metallic scent of fresh-drawn well. The steam from the pot leans toward it, curious. The other figure sets nothing down, yet stands for a moment as though they had carried the same weight. A sleeve brushes your arm when they pass, not firmly, not carelessly, just enough to be felt through wool. Then they are gone, and you remain with the buckets, the yoke, and the ache in your shoulders, which suddenly feels less heavy than it did. You dip the ladle into one bucket and pour water into the pot. The hiss is soft, almost grateful. You wipe your palms on your robe and look at the yolk resting against the wall. It leans there now, innocent, though it remembers everything you carried together. The kitchen settles into its late morning hum, every task repeating itself with quiet confidence. You hear the broom whisper over stone, the pots whisper over fire, and above it all comes a sound not quite intended for ears, a low hum, steady, almost tuneless. It drifts like smoke from the far side of the room, barely rising above the bubbling of stew. You pause with your knife resting against a parsnip, listening. The tune is not from the hymnal, not from the chant books that echo through the chapel at set hours. It is looser, more private, no words attached, just a line of sound sliding up, then down, then staying somewhere in the middle as though undecided. The kind of tune that keeps a person's hands busy without their mind wandering too far away. The parsnip waits while you listen. The hum wavers near the herb bundles hanging from the rafters. It blends with the crackle of the fire until it becomes uncertain where one ends and the other begins. The voice is low, never sharp, more vibration than note. It swells once, just enough to be noticed, then tucks itself back into the background, as if shy about being overheard. You return to the knife, slicing clean, measured pieces. The hum continues, weaving itself between each stroke, filling the spaces your silence leaves behind. You catch yourself tapping the tip of the blade softly against the board in rhythm with the sound, as though accompanying it without meaning to. The tune shifts slightly, accommodating your rhythm, and you wonder if the coincidence is noticed. You add the pieces to the pot, where they vanish into steam. The smell of sweet root and coriander rises, meeting the tune in the air as if scent and sound belong to the same hymn. You stir, slowly, and the spoon makes its own music wood scraping copper, liquid folding over itself. Together, the three threads hum, scrape, bubble, become a chorus without ambition. The hum stops suddenly, as though it had been caught in the act. You glance sideways and see only a shoulder bent toward a bowl, sleeves rolled higher than the rules would allow if anyone were watching. The silence that follows is louder than the tune was, and it presses into the corners of the room. You keep stirring, not hurrying, not slowing, waiting. After a moment, the sound returns, softer, broken into smaller pieces now, almost like breathing on purpose. The shoulder shifts, the knife resumes its quiet rhythm, and the tune follows again. It curls around the rafters, invisible and unclaimed. You hum a note yourself, just one, low and nearly buried in the scrape of the spoon. It could be mistaken for clearing your throat, or for nothing at all. Still, the other hum adjusts slightly, meeting yours in the middle for a heartbeat before wandering away again. It is not harmony, not melody, just two sounds that happen to live in the same kitchen at the same time. The parsnip slices thin, the broth thickens, the hum ebbs and flows. You let it wash over you like the warmth of the fire, neither invited nor unwelcome, simply present. When it stops again, replaced by the clink of a bowl against the table, you miss it more than you expected. But the kitchen remembers, and so do you. You place your knife down, wipe your hands on your apron, and stand still for a moment. The silence stretches, softened by steam. Somewhere across the block, a hand adjusts a bundle of herbs, fingers brushing thyme leaves that rain down in small green flecks. One lands near your wrist, fragrant, sharp. You pick it up, roll it between your fingers, and let it fall into the pot, where it disappears with a hiss. The hum does not return, but the air keeps its echo. You stir again, keeping the circle steady, your breath falling into the same rhythm the tune once held. You know it will come back, in time. For now, the kitchen keeps its peace, filled with heat, scent, and the faint ghost of a song that pretends it was never sung. You stand on the low stool, the wood wobbling faintly beneath your sandals. Above you, the rafters spread their dark beams, blackened from years of smoke, their surfaces rough where the fire's breath has licked but never consumed. Strung across them are bundles of herbs tied in twine, their shadows hanging long and uneven against the ceiling. They sway a little when the draft moves through the high-slit window, as if bowing to some invisible rhythm. You reach up, sleeves slipping back toward your elbows. The air near the rafters is warmer, seasoned with dry leaf and soot. Your fingertips graze the dangling stalks of sage, first grey-green leaves curled in on themselves, brittle now, releasing a soft dust that sticks to your skin. The smell rises immediately, sharp and earthy, pricking your nose like a memory of open hillsides. You untie a small bundle and cradle it against your palm. The twine has left ridges in the stems, grooves pressed so deeply they will never forget. You carry it down carefully, the stool groaning as you step off. The bundle feels light, but the scent is heavy, filling the space around your chest. You lay it on the table, brush your hands down your sleeves, and the faint dust clings like a secret you cannot quite remove. The rafters still wait with their hanging crop. You climb again, reaching farther this time. Time crumbles when you touch it, releasing its sharp green tang into the air. You hold your wrist close and breathe it in. The warmth of the air has drawn the oils to the surface, and now it coats your skin with fragrance, as though it wished to be remembered. You lower the bundle, set it beside the sage, and let the dust scatter across the board. Another figure passes below, steadying the stool with one hand without speaking. Their palm rests against the rung longer than necessary, keeping the wood from wobbling even after you have already found your balance. You look down briefly, your wrist half bared by the fallen sleeve, and their eyes lift to it just as yours lower to them. For a heartbeat, the line of sight is unavoidable, and then both of you retreat into the safety of task. You tug a sprig of rosemary from the rafters, its needles stiff and resinous, their smell sharp like pine sharpened by sun. It scratches faintly against your wrist as you draw it down, leaving a line of scent. The hand still steadies the stool. You murmur a quiet thanks that could be meant for the stool itself, and the hand withdraws without answer, leaving the wood to creak under your weight. On the table, the bundles gather a small field laid out in miniature, each herb carrying its memory of summer. The kitchen fills with their competing voices: sage, thyme, rosemary, dill. The stew pot catches their scent as the air drifts and begins to sound more cheerful in its simmer. You crush a sprig between your fingers, and the oils spread into your skin. You rub your thumb across your palm, feeling the faint tackiness, smelling the sharp greenness that lingers there. You tie the bundles again, smaller now, meant for the day's use. The twine scratches your wrist as you pull it tight, leaving small marks on your skin that echo the ridges on the stems. You set the bundles near the hearth where the heat will remind them to release more of themselves into the air. Above, the rafters sway slightly with the draft, empty spaces showing where bundles once hung. The ceiling feels higher now, its beams stretching back into shadow. Dust falls in lazy drifts, lit by a shaft of sun that has finally chosen to appear at the high window. It catches the dust and makes it glow faintly, a soft golden haze against the black beam. You rub your wrists together absently, brushing off the last clinging fragments of sage and thyme. The skin there tingles with scent, sharper than the soap you will use at day's end. You lower your sleeves again, hiding the marks of twine and herb beneath wool. The rafters return to their quiet, hanging shadows once more. The bundles rest on the table, waiting to be crumbled into the stew. The smell in the kitchen is brighter, greener, less heavy with root and smoke. You sit back on the stool and let the fragrance fold around you, as if the air itself had decided to be generous. You sit near the hearth again, spoon in hand, the broth moving in slow circles under your wrist. The motion is small, steady, never hurried. The sound it makes is a faint scrape against copper, as if wood and metal were whispering to each other about patience. Steam rises in soft clouds, carrying onion sweetness, cabbage weight, and the green brightness of thyme you crushed earlier. It curls around your face and dampens your brow, a reminder that kitchens do not need rain to make you wet. You keep your eyes on the surface. The broth rolls lazily, vegetables swaying like monks in procession, turnips bumping against carrots, pale cabbage ribbons drifting past potatoes that dissolve into softness at their edges. The surface breaks now and then with a bubble, each one a polite announcement before vanishing. You follow them with your gaze, not because they matter, but because they give the eye something simple to obey. The spoon's path is the same each time, Circle the rim, brush the middle, lift and lower. A rhythm of circles that leaves nothing changed except the comfort of repetition. Your hand knows it so well that your mind drifts while your wrist continues. You listen to your own breath mingling with the pots. Slow in, slow out, steam in, breath out. The wood of the spoon is dark from years of broth, polished smooth where countless palms have held it. The handle warms under your grip, carrying the fire's memory into your hand. You feel the heat creeping through your skin, resting in your knuckles, softening the stiffness that morning gave you. You do not let go. Across the table, a hand reaches for a bowl. The movement is unremarkable, but the sleeve shifts, and in the shifting you catch the faint outline of fingers brushing a jar. The hand hovers near your side of the table for a heartbeat, then withdraws. The jar remains untouched. The air feels thicker for a moment, though nothing has changed but you're noticing. The spoon dips into the broth, lifts, and pours the liquid back with a thin stream. The sound is quiet, like rain finding its way through leaves. Droplets slide down the spoon's edge, trembling before they fall. You watch them disappear, one by one, into the pot. You stir again, as though to erase the pause. The smell grows stronger as the broth thickens, onions melting into sweetness, herbs unfolding their voices. A sprig of rosemary floats near the surface, its needles darkened and soft. You press it under with the back of the spoon, and it resurfaces stubbornly, as if unwilling to let go of air. You leave it alone. It will soften in its own time. The hand returns, this time carrying a ladle. It dips into the broth just beside your spoon. For a moment, two circles overlap your slow one, their careful one steam rising between. The spoons brush once, wood against metal. A soft clink that should mean nothing. Neither of you comments. The ladle withdraws, full, leaving your spoon to continue its endless round. You lean closer to the pot, letting steam blur the air until everything looks softer. The broth swirls under your hand, vegetables moving in quiet surrender. The circle widens, narrows, widens again. You could do this forever, and the pot would never argue. You rest your chin briefly on your wrist, the spoon still moving. The circle does not falter. The kitchen fades to hums and crackles and breaths. You feel the warmth on your face, the dampness on your brow, the weight of the wooden handle in your palm. The spoon moves. The broth circles. The moment stays. By the doorway, the row of pegs keeps its strict little order. Cloaks hung like obedient shadows. Hems aligned as if measuring one another. Hoods folded with the dull pride of things that know their place. The stone beside them is worn smooth where palms have pressed while reaching. A polished stripe in a wall that otherwise prefers roughness. The draft lives here, slipping under the door and along the floor, making the pegs click softly as wooden tongues. Today, one cloak has decided rules apply to other cloaks. It hangs 2 pegs away from where it belongs, thrown up not quite inside out, not quite straight, its hem angled toward the hearth as if hoping for attention. The wool shows a darker band where rain marked it and then lost interest. A thread of straw clings to the edge, stubborn as a small idea. The clasp at the throat is half latched, a little open mouth that forgot to close. You notice it because not noticing would require effort. You are bringing kindling from the basket, and your sleeve gathers a cold brush from the draft that owns this corner. The other cloaks behave. This one considers. You pause with 3 sticks in your hand and look without looking, the way one learns to look when kitchens are full of small witnesses that prefer not to testify. The smell here is different from the hearth's breath. Under the usual smoke and wet wool, a thin line of rosemary lingers, not from the rafters, but from oil rubbed into cloth. There is also a faint soap the laundry rarely produces, the kind that leaves no perfume except an absence of everything else. You stand close enough to smell and far enough to deny you were ever near. The peg above the mislaid cloak is lightly scuffed, as though someone reached in haste and changed their mind. You might straighten the rebel out of pity for the pegs if not for the intelligence of your hands, which prefer to seem unhelpful. You set the kindling in the scuttle instead. Hear the rattle of thin sticks becoming future flame, and allow the cloak to continue its experiment with geometry. You crouch to sort the kindling thick pieces to one side, thin to the other, because sorting is useful when thinking is not. Your shoulder brushes the lower edge of the cloak. Cold wool touches warm sleeve, and the difference teaches both to behave. A thread catches on your cuff, thin as a hair, and you free it carefully, as if unwinding a note you would prefer not to read. At the far end of the pegs, another hand arrives with a broom and the casual authority of someone who owns nothing but is responsible for everything. The broom begins its soft sentences along the floor, gathering flower ghosts and the onion skins that slip under benches to dream. The mislaid cloak performs indifference. Draft, you say to the air, which is an accurate remark. The broom agrees by sweeping once across a damp circle on the stone, smudging it into a dark crescent that looks like a thought half finished. 2 fingers tuck a straw from the hem, the gesture professional in a way that refuses to be anything else. You stand and tug the door a finger's width to encourage the draft to choose a new hobby. The hinge answers in a language it learned from rain. Outside, the courtyard keeps its pale day. Inside, the pegs settle. The cloak still leans toward the hearth like a pilgrim considering a shortcut. If you were to straighten it, you would take the hood, turn the hem, find the clasp, and close the small open mouth. You do none of that. You touch the peg instead, just the peg feeling the warmth that hands leave even in cold stone rooms. The wood is worn smooth from years of simple certainty. The cloak ignores your caution and continues to be itself, which is perhaps the point of cloaks. A sleeve approaches, familiar in its quiet. It reaches for the neighboring robe and shakes a rain bead from the edge, careful, practiced, unbothered. In the same unhurried motion, the sleeve nudges the wayward cloth a thumb's breadth higher on its peg. The adjustment looks like nothing at all. The hem straightens as much as its personality allows. The clasp closes with a soft click that might be the sound of manners. Better, you say, but only to the broom, which has finished speaking with the floor. The other sleeve withdraws, claiming a ladle from the wall as though it had always come for that. The ladle lifts, the pot accepts it, and the kitchen resumes its study of circles. You add the kindling to the hearth in the little tunnel you always leave so flame can remember it is not alone. Heat responds. As faithful as an old dog, the draft slackens, sated by a crack under the sill you cannot see. The row of cloaks returns to orderly shadow. Even the rebellious one, chastened by circumstances, rests more convincingly now. Still, it keeps one small announcement. The hem bears a twin line, a seam stitched twice with the same thread, not the laundry's habit. The knot sits on the outside, a little bump like a pulse. You would not have noticed if the cloak had not asked to be noticed by standing badly. You let your finger drift near, not touching, and then turn away with the excellent sense of someone who knows the difference between seeing and keeping. A bell speaks once from the refectory, not a call, only a reminder that time exists even when kitchens pretend it does not. You lower the stew lid, fold the towel, and lay it back on its hook. On your way past the doorway, you do not look again at the pegs, which is of course why you know exactly how they stand. The draft has chosen elsewhere. The cloak presents itself as if it had always been exemplary. You allow it the courtesy of being believed. You return to the hearth and the honest company of heat. The kindling settles into ember, the spoon resumes its rounds, and the kitchen resumes you. At your back, wool hangs, dries, forget. At your hands, broth thickens, remembers. Between those two, a door keeps its mind on hinges, and you keep yours on the work that proves you were here. On the hearth's side table, a small pan waits, blackened along its rim, its bottom scarred from years of fire. Inside it lies a shallow heap of chestnuts, their shells marked with neat little cuts made earlier with a paring knife. The cuts are crooked but serviceable, enough to let the steam escape when heat persuades the nuts to open. They rest there, like patient stones, dull brown, faintly glossy, where the knife has revealed paler flesh beneath. You shift them into the embers with the flat of a shovel, their shells clicking softly against one another. The fire accepts them with a low sigh, and almost at once, the smell begins. It is sweet, warm, earthy, different from bread, different from stew, yet belonging to the same family of comfort. The air thickens with it, climbing into your nose, settling against the roof of your mouth before you have even tasted. The chestnuts crackle faintly as the shells begin to split along their scored lines. You lean closer, resting elbows on knees, and watch steam curl upward, thin and white against the dark of the chimney. The shells blister and blacken at their edges, some peeling back like lips opening to speak. The sound is quiet but insistent, a language of small, sharp pops. You reach with tongs and stir them, turning the nuts so they cook evenly. The iron grips their hot shells, each one giving a tiny hiss as it shifts position. You drop them back into the embers, and they land with a muffled clatter. The smell grows rich and nutty, almost sweet, with a faint edge of smoke. A hand sets a wooden bowl beside you on the bench, its surface rough with long use. You glance, but do not speak. The hand rests there for a moment, long enough for you to notice the damp heat it leaves on the wood, then withdraws. You prod the chestnuts again, feeling the fire's warmth sting your face. When they are ready, you scoop them out, tumbling them into the bowl. Their shells are split and curling back, the pale nut meat peeking through. They hiss faintly as they cool, releasing small wisps of steam-like sighs. You hold one in your palm, turning it carefully before peeling away the brittle shell. The skin clings, dark and papery, but comes free with patience. Inside, the nut is soft, golden, warm enough to sting your fingertips. You break it in half and place one piece into your mouth. It tastes of fire and wood and sweetness hidden in the earth. The warmth spreads across your tongue, and you chew slowly, letting it dissolve into softness. The second half waits in your palm. You glance toward the bench and see another hand resting there, as if by chance. You extend your palm slightly. The hand accepts, fingertips brushing yours just long enough to take the nut. The bowl sits between you now, filled with cracked shells and steam. Neither of you speaks. The fire does the talking, logs settling, embers shifting, chestnuts clicking faintly as their heat fades. You peel another, the skin stubborn, the nut underneath eager. You eat half, pass half, the rhythm as simple as stirring stew. The shells pile in a small heap on the board. Some are blackened, curled tight, as if still guarding their treasure. Others lie open, hollow, having already given all they had. The smell of roasted nut hangs in the air, mingling with cabbage and onion, creating a warmth that belongs to no one and everyone. You rub your fingers together, sticky with the faint oil of chestnut. The other hand does the same, brushing skin absently against apron wool. For a brief moment your elbows nearly touch. Then the hand lifts another nut, offers it without words. You take it, peel it, split it, share it back. The rhythm continues, quiet and unremarkable, the kind of sharing that pretends to be about food. When the bowl is nearly empty, you tip the last shells into the fire. They flare quickly, then collapse into ash. The warmth lingers in your mouth, your hands, your sleeve where it brushed another sleeve. The kitchen, busy with its usual murmurs, seems unaware. The pot bubbles, the broom whispers, the rafters hang their herbs. Only the faint sweetness in the air remembers the chestnuts, and perhaps so do you. The meal ends, and the bowls find their way to the basin by the wall, where water waits grey, lukewarm, carrying the day's first layer of grease and flour. You stand before it with sleeves rolled high, the wooden ladle set aside, the rag ready in your palm. The basin is carved stone, deep and square, its edges worn smooth by centuries of bowls being lowered, dipped, scrubbed, and stacked again. It smells of lye soap, faint and bitter, though the scent is softened by the steam still wandering from the hearth. You lower the first bowl, tilting it so the water fills and loosens the thin film of broth. The cloth follows, circling the rim, pressing into the grain of wood. Small bubbles rise, fragile and quick to vanish, like thoughts that never finish. Your hands move slowly, not hurried, not reluctant, simply steady. The water clouds further with each bowl, but you continue, trusting the lie to do what lie has always done. Beside you, another pair of hands joins in, wordless, dipping a spoon into the basin. The wood gleams darker when wet, lighter when lifted. The spoons knock gently against each other, a hollow clink that belongs to kitchens everywhere. Sleeves brush, once, twice, too often to be accident, too quiet to be remarked upon. You glance at the reflection in the water, it bends both your faces until they dissolve into ripples. You drop your gaze to the bowl instead. The cloth squeezes water over your wrist, running down in thin trails, collecting at the edge of your palm. You shake it away, but the dampness lingers. The other hand reaches into the basin at the same moment, fingertips grazing yours under the cloudy water. For a second, you cannot tell which fingers belong to which hand. Then the bowl is lifted, rinsed, and set aside, leaving the contact behind with the soap bubbles. You continue without pause. Another bowl, another circle of the rag, another rinse, another stack. The rhythm calms, steady as a chant without melody. The pile of clean bowls grows taller, leaning against the wall in patient silence. The water grows darker, less forgiving, but still serviceable. The sound of cloth against wood, wood against stone, water against basin, it fills the air more completely than words ever could. Your hands redden from the lie, the skin tightening slightly, but you keep moving. Across from you, the same motions mirror yours. 2 cloths, 2 sets of bowls, 1 basin, 1 rhythm. When the last bowl is set aside, the water is little more than a grey shadow. You lift the basin with care, tilt it toward the drain at the floor. The water leaves in a slow stream, carrying foam and scraps with it, until the stone is bare again. You wipe the rim with the cloth, hang it back on its peg, and flex your hands to ease the sting. The other hands rest briefly on the edge of the basin, knuckles pale, veins faintly blue under damp skin. They remain there longer than necessary, as though listening to the stone itself. Then they withdraw, leaving only the faint smell of soap in their place. You dry your palms on the apron, the fabric rough against raw skin. The basin is empty now, the bowls stacked, the spoons quiet. The work is done. Yet the silence it leaves behind feels heavier than the task itself. You look down at your hands. They smell of lye, broth, and something else the water did not wash away. You rub them together once more, slowly, and let the kitchen swallow the sound. Evening arrives, the way flour settles slowly, softly, everywhere at once. The kitchen's heat loosens its hold, and the light that belonged to the high window slides off the table to find other work. What remains is hearth glow and the patience of shadows, long as ladles, gentle as steam. You stand a little while to let your eyes relearn the room, the corners deeper, the copper row turned to a procession of dark moons. On the side shelf, the lantern waits with hornpanes clouded by use. You lift it, feel the sturdiness of its wooden frame, the little door rasping on its pin. Inside hangs a stub of tallow, its wick bent like a tired reed. Beeswax is for the altar. Kitchens take animal fat and make peace with the smell. You open the tinderbox flint, steel, a ragged square of char, and kneel by the embers that keep their slow gossip. The first strike throws a brief star, then another. Sparks kiss the cloth, bite and hold. You blow carefully, lend breath to fire, and the scrap brightens from coal to orange to a steady yes. The wick accepts the flame with a small complaint. The horn needs the light until it is butter soft. You hang the lantern by the pegs and set another on the table, a twin that remembers different hands. Their light is nearer than day, a light that prefers faces to distances. Shadows gather behind baskets and under benches like friendly conspirators. Copper pots collect coins of glow along their bruised bellies and spend them slowly across the wall. The room begins to speak in new colors, amber on wood, sienna in soot, a subdued gold in the flour dust that never quite leaves the air. The stew mutters into quietness, thick and resolved. You skim a last pool of fat with the back of a spoon and let it slide into the ash bucket where it will forget being important. The bread on the board shows cooling cracks, fine, pale rivers that mean the crumb has set and will slice without complaint. You trim a wick with the little scissor that lives on a string The snip is almost lost under the hearth's steady breath. The flame climbs straight, bows when the draft makes a suggestion. You move it a hand's width, and the suggestion is withdrawn. Small negotiations keep the evening gentle. From the corridor, footfalls pass, softened by wool and habit. Voices do not bother with words. They exchange only the weight of breathing and the creak of sandals. The bell will speak again soon, deeper now, saying the sun has left the field. For the moment, the kitchen keeps its own hour, the time of rinsing knives, folding cloths, deciding how much warmth the night should inherit. You carry one lantern toward the storage alcove, its circle of light walking ahead like a tame animal. The horn blurs, edges the barrel hoops, the sacks of rye, the dim wedges of cheese wrapped in cloth to keep them from ambition. Mice have their opinions, written in tiny teeth on a corner of sacking. You touch the rip and tuck it under. The handle warms your fingers. The faint tallow odor insists you are exactly where you are. When you turn, another light moves from the hearth side, meeting your circle, making an almond of brightness between you. The horn panes reflect a face that is both yours and not yours, stretched thin by the little window. For a breath, the two lanterns tilt together, and the twin flames steady, as if surprised to find company. Then you step apart and the almond becomes two coins again, walking back into their separate shadows. On the table, you lay out the bowls for evening brothwood, darkened by many washings, rims smooth as worn stone. The lantern warms their edges, and each bowl holds a small lake of light, shallow and perfectly still. You stand longer than necessary, counting the lakes, not because the number matters, but because the counting itself is sleepy and kind. You slice the bread. The crust yields with a civilized protest. The knife's whisper almost polite. Crumbs leap and then calm themselves. You lay the slices like shingles, overlapping just enough to look intentional. A heel goes to its old place near the hearth. Tradition is a habit that does the remembering for you. The lantern near the pegs shows the line of cloaks at rest, their shadows taller than any of you manage in daylight. One clasp gleams recently closed. You do not investigate shine, you respect it from a distance. The draft plays at the hem of a robe, loses interest, and goes off to annoy the door. You bring the second lantern to the hearth and check the stew's bottom where sticking likes to begin its career. The spoon travels the curve of the pot with a sound like a finger around a bell. Nothing has burned. The evening approves your attention. You put that approval away with other small satisfactions, stacked neatly, easy to reach when sleep will not. Low light invites smaller noises. A faint tick from timbers letting go of day's heat, ash settling into new shapes, the soft hurry of a moth discovering the horn pane and changing its mind. You open the lantern door, and the moth escapes without scandal, leaving only a memory of powder and a better opinion of doors. From somewhere just beyond the table comes the sound of a breath held and then released. The lantern makes an ordinary halo on the board, and two hands enter that circle to fold a cloth, edge to edge, then again, square upon square. You add your hands without asking, and the cloth becomes obedient under 4 thumbs instead of 2. Knuckles touch in a corner, as if the square could not be convinced without that last small agreement. The cloth is set aside. The light keeps its halo. You blow gently across the stew to lift a skin that would prefer to exist. Steam threads the lantern beam, turning the light into something you can nearly see moving. Shadows inflate against the wall your own, the spoons, the long neck of a ladle practicing heroism in case the night requires heroes. You carry one bowl to the door for the porter who eats late. The corridor fits the lantern's circle over each stone like a measured blessing. At the threshold you pause, because the air there is cool and tastes of damp lime. The bowl's warmth travels through your fingers into your wrist, telling your pulse a kinder story. When you return, the kitchen receives you as if you had not left at all. It will be night soon. The lanterns will multiply and then diminish. Wicks pinched, flames persuaded to surrender while a few coals are bullied into survival for morning. For now, the light is enough to draw faces near and push corners farther away. You stand between the two lanterns and let their warmth gild your hand. The horn panes cloud and clear, as if the light itself were breathing. You set one lantern nearer the bench where you will sit in a while, not to do anything sensible, only to borrow the kind of quiet that has weight. The flame answers with a small, upright confidence. Around it, the room gathers into a circle that fits inside your chest. Most of the day's work has left your hands, but a little of its heat remains, and the evening makes use of it, turning work into rest, the way tallow turns into light. You listen for the bell, and hear, before it, the lantern itself. A faint tremor as hot air climbs, the gentlest rattle when a draught remembers an adventure. You breathe in smoke, tallow, bread, the ghost of rosemary. You breathe out and watch nothing change. The walls are nearer, the shadows longer, the light kind. You let it be enough. The kitchen has quieted into a softness that belongs to evening, but not all the corners agree to silence. By the barrel near the wall, behind the stack of baskets, a sound stirs that is not fire, not spoon, not broom. It is laughter, small and folded in on itself like a secret told to a sleeve. It does not travel far. It tries not to travel at all. You hear it while rinsing the ladle, the water clinking softly against its bowl. The sound reaches you, pauses as though deciding whether to continue, then flickers again, half a chuckle, half a sigh. You set the ladle on the table, wipe your hands against the apron, and let your ears do what eyes should not. The barrel is tall, once used for beer, now half filled with grain. Its staves are dark with dampness, iron hoops rusting in quiet rings. Behind it, shadows gather like robes hung to dry. That is where the sound hides, faint and quick, released in bursts that end before they can echo. The laughter is careful, worn close to the chest, the kind that dares only when the fire is busy looking elsewhere. You do not move toward it, but you tilt your head as if listening to the stews simmer. A hand appears briefly on the rim of the barrel, fingers tapping once, twice, as if keeping time with a story you were not meant to hear. Then it vanishes again. Another murmur rises half a phrase, then laughter again, soft as cloth shaken gently. You lower your gaze to the floor where light pools in amber circles from the lanterns. Dust motes dance in the glow, unconcerned with secrecy. You sweep a few crumbs with your palm, letting them fall into the fire, their small crackles disguising the noise behind the barrel. The sound persists, softer now, as if testing whether the kitchen has ears. The laughter stops suddenly, like a candle pinched out. Silence expands, thick, deliberate. You stir the pot once, spoon making its ordinary circuit, wood against copper, nothing unusual. From behind the barrel comes only breathing, controlled, steady, pretending not to exist. Then the barrel shifts slightly, not enough to draw attention, only enough to remind you that space can be shared even when no one says so. The hand reappears, this time brushing the floor, fingertips tracing a line through flour dust before curling back into shadow. You notice the trail left behind, a pale mark like a path no one walked. You take up a rag and wipe the table, drawing circles that echo the spoon's earlier path. The cloth smells faintly of lye and onions. The sound returns, not laughter now, but a breath caught between teeth, too sharp to be sigh, too soft to be speech. It lives for a heartbeat, then hides again. You lift a chestnut shell from the hearth, blackened and curled, and roll it between your fingers. It cracks faintly, a sound that might cover another sound. You drop it into the ash bucket and watch it vanish among the grey. The lantern by the pegs flickers as the draught nudges it, sending shadows across the wall. The barrel's shadow stretches and bends, wider than it should be. In the movement, you glimpse the shape of a shoulder, the edge of a hood, the suggestion of someone leaning too near another someone. The flicker passes, and the shadows settle back into obedience. You straighten the row of bowls on the shelf, aligning their rims, though they were already aligned. Behind the barrel, cloth shifts faintly, the rustle of wool against wool. Then silence again, perfect and complete, as though the room had imagined the sound. You do not turn, you do not ask. You carry the rag to the peg, hang it by its frayed corner, and let it swing once before it stills. The laughter has gone where it was told to go. The barrel keeps its secrets. The lantern hums quietly, unaware, But the air remembers. The air is thicker now, warmer, as if it has swallowed something and chosen not to speak of it. You breathe it in, slow, steady, careful not to disturb the silence. You breathe it out, slower still, and the kitchen accepts the breath as though it belonged to the room itself. The kitchen is hushed, yet not empty of presence. The fire breathes in low embers, no longer snapping, only glowing. The air carries a mild sweetness from the dried apples that were sliced earlier, their skins curling at the edges, their scent clinging to the rafters. You move slowly across the flagstones, your steps softened by the habit of silence. Near the long table, the benches stand abandoned, their wood polished only by years of robes and hands. The shadows of the benches stretch into the floor, stiff and angular, unlike the softer ones cast by the barrels and sacks. You place your palm briefly against the bench, feeling the cool grain beneath your fingertips. The wood hums with stillness, as if holding on to the weight of earlier bodies. At the far wall, a window sits shuttered, its cracks allowing thin stripes of night air to sneak in. The air is damp, carrying the faintest trace of pine smoke from the outside. You pause, pressing your hand near the shutter, and feel the draft slide along your skin. It is a small reminder that beyond these walls lies a darkness, broader and freer than the one you stand in. The copper pots hang silently, suspended from their hooks, their curved bellies catching and bending the lamplight. Each one holds its own reflection, dim and elongated, as if the kitchen itself were stretched into a quieter world. You glance at your own shape, in one of them blurred, doubled, faint, like a ghost who stirs but does not speak. The hearth glows faintly with ash. You prod a log with the poker, though the log does not need it. Sparks rise lazily, drifting upward until they vanish into the dark above the chimney. Each one flickers like a thought that almost wishes to be voiced, then quickly decides against it. You cross to the shelf of dried herbs. Bundles of sage, rosemary, and marjoram hang in tidy rows, their leaves brittle, their stems tied with pale string. You brush a hand along them lightly. They crumble at the touch, releasing faint perfumes that fold into the kitchen's heavier smells of smoke and grain. The mixture is comforting, steady, the sort of scent that promises repetition without end. Near the door, a jug of water sits against the wall, its clay sides cool and damp to the touch. You lift the lid, dip the ladle, and drink a slow mouthful. The water tastes of stone, clean and faintly metallic, the taste of the well itself. You swallow carefully, then let the coolness linger in your chest, balancing the warmth of the hearth. The barrel in the corner does not stir. The silence there is heavier than elsewhere, a silence chosen, deliberate. You do not approach it. Instead, you sweep your gaze over the floor once more, noting the faint tracks of flour, the scatter of husks near the table leg, the curved outline left where a stool once stood. Everything seems in its place, even the marks of absence. You sit on the edge of the bench, your palms resting flat on either side of your thighs. The wood is solid, unyielding, yet it receives you without complaint. Your eyes trace the ceiling beams overhead, darkened by years of smoke, running across the length of the kitchen like ribs holding up the body of the room. Between them, the shadows deepen, as though the roof were stitched together by night itself. The quiet thickens. You hear your own breath as clearly as if it were someone else's. In, steady, out, slower. The kitchen breathes with you, each exhale softening the fire, each inhale drawing in the scents of herbs and ash. You feel no need to fill the silence. It has already chosen its shape, and you are inside it. The jug is set back in its place, the ladle returned to its rim. You rise, adjust the bench a finger's width so it aligns with the table, then let your hands fall to your sides. The lantern wavers once in a draught, light gliding across copper, then steadies again. Shadows return to their old positions, as if nothing had been disturbed. You take another breath, slow, deliberate, and the kitchen accepts it like a confession it has heard too many times before. You choose the narrowest path the kitchen offers, which is generous of you because the kitchen has several that compete for the honor. Between hearthstones and the long table runs a lane made for one careful body at a time, a lane designed by someone who loved elbows negotiating treaties. You hold a bowl of sliced roots in both hands and begin the small procession past hanging ladles, past the peel like a sentry, past the bench corner that stubs pride more than toes. The air here is warmer than the rest of the room, as if the fire keeps a private corridor for itself. Tallow thickens the lantern light, turning edges soft. Steam wavers from the pot and finds your face without asking permission. It smells of onions learning manners, thyme persuaded to behave, cabbage choosing not to sulk. Your sleeves, rolled halfway, drink a little damp and then pretend they did not. At the pinch point, another figure arrives from the opposite end with the inevitability of bells. There is no room for ceremony. There is barely room for disagreement. You both turn your shoulders only a finger's width, and in that brief turn, the wool of one sleeve learns the wool of another. Cloth on cloth. A dry hush like a page turned by someone who already knows the story. Your skin notices through the layers and files the knowledge where the kitchen keeps other useful records. You keep moving. They keep moving. The lane, pleased with itself, widens again by the width of a thought. You set the bowl near the hearth and take up the spoon, pretending this was always the destination. The spoon makes its circle, faithful as ever, erasing tracks as it draws them. Behind you, footsteps go to the water jar, pause, return along the tight path, slower now, as if the stone has suggested a different opinion. When you turn back with the empty bowl, the passing happens again, sleeve to sleeve, 2 notes on a string. You say it is the nature of small kitchens, and the kitchen nods. The rafters do not comment. The lantern hums. You proceed as if the world were made of lanes and errands and harmless collisions. You fetch the salt, cradling the crock so the lid will not chatter. The salt smells of damp cellar and miner's patience. Halfway down, the lane offers you the same problem. There is a small adjustment, a choreography the room has taught you, shoulders quartered, chin lowered, elbow obedient to the geometry of restraint. The sleeves meet with the respect of colleagues, no flourish, no apology, acknowledgement. A few crystals leap to your cuff. You brush them off and leave a pale constellation the cloth will carry until washing teaches it humility. At the table you pinch rosemary between finger and thumb. The needles prick your skin with friendly insistence, and resin tints your pulse. Steam gathers on your brow again, the kitchen's way of making you honest. On the return with the herb, the sleeve returns too, as if summoned by time and coincidence. The graze is softer now, possibly because both sleeves have learned each other's argument. The herb brushes their wrist. A brighter scent rises, sudden and brief, like a door almost opened. A ladle clinks. A log settles. The peel, without moving, approves. You tip the rosemary into the pot, and the broth accepts it as though meant for that exact inch of surface. You stir. You do not look up. Looking up would make the lane wider, and the lane prefers its vocation. You take the bread knife because the loaf has cooled. On the return, the narrowness offers its lesson yet again. Your free hand rises, palm open, and for a brief, accidental moment meets another palm doing the same sensible thing, guarding bowls, guarding ribs, guarding nothing in particular. Wool follows wool. Skin, separated by cloth, pretends not to care. You pass. The knife continues toward the board as if knives had thoughts to keep. Slices fall, tidy shingles, crumbs assemble into small geography along the wood. You align the slices, because alignment spares the room decisions. A heel goes to the hearth. Tradition dislikes surprises. You carry 2 pieces to the pot for a moment's steam, then back along the lane. The sleeves find each other in transit with the accuracy of habit. You offer 1 slice. It is taken, the edge damp with heat, your fingertips staying a fraction too long because the crust insists on being difficult. No one speaks. The kitchen is eloquent enough. Copper catches a square of lantern and turns it into a coin you will not spend. A drip discovers the basin and is content to be singular. You taste your own slice and taste the day. Grain honest as stone, a shadow of smoke, the faint persistent note of rosemary that refuses to be quiet. On the next pass you carry the small jug of beer, its lip whitened from careful tapping. It sloshes a modest argument with each step, but manners prevail. At the pinch point, sleeves consult yours tilting, theirs lowering, and the jug travels through that tribunal without spilling. The satisfaction is small and sufficient. You set the jug down, and the room resets around the placement as rooms do when they trust you. A moth touches the lantern horn and changes its plan. You smooth your sleeve, find a stray rosemary needle, and leave it there because the cloth seems pleased to have acquired a story. The lane, having supervised these negotiations, releases you into wider stone. You stand a moment with empty hands and feel the ghost of wool along your forearm, warm in memory, cool in fact. You rub the place once, as if testing for flour, and discover only the idea of being touched, busy and light, and, like steam, unwilling to be held. You return the bowl to the shelf, the knife to its hook, the jug to its shadow. The sleeves keep to their duties elsewhere. The kitchen, soothed by proper arrangements, lowers its voice another notch. You walk the narrow path one last time with nothing to carry, just to see if the space remembers you. It does. The brush does not come, and that too is a kind of touch. You turn back to the hearth. The spoon waits for circles. Night leans closer to the horn panes. Somewhere a cloak dries itself into better manners. Your sleeves settle at your wrists as if they have never had adventures. You lift the spoon and begin again, not because anything demands it, but because repetition is the one romance the kitchen publicly approves. You set the spoon down and decide the mortar has waited long enough. It sits on the shelf with a mild patience, the stone bowl shadowed by a pestle that looks heavier than it needs to be. You cradle it with both hands as if stone could break, and carry it to the table where garlic has arranged itself in small white argument. You peel the cloves slowly, as though removing parchment from a secret charter. The skins curl away in papery sighs, gathering like confessions on the board. You place each bare clove in the mortar, one after the other, their pale gloss catching the lantern's dull encouragement. The pestle descends in measured rhythm, stone on stone, a muffled percussion the rafters do not object to. The smell rises quickly, sharp, awake, unwilling to pretend otherwise. It mingles with the calmer herbs, jostles with the onion, makes the cabbage nervous. You grind with steady turns, pressing down, circling, listening to the scrape that becomes smoother as the cloves surrender. The paste forms, creamy and insistent, a flavor that will not be quiet even when folded into broth. As you lift the pestle again, footsteps join the rhythm, soft leather crossing stone. You do not look up. You add a pinch of salt to the paste. Fold it with the pestle's round weight. Let the grains dissolve into the mixture with a faint rasp. A shadow leans closer to the table, then shifts away again, considering. You scoop the paste with a wooden spoon and carry it to the pot. The lane narrows again, as it always does at the worst moment, and the sleeves remember their arrangement. They brush once more, deliberate by accident. A faint warmth lingers through the wool. You pretend your grip on the spoon required such steadiness, though the kitchen knows better. The paste hits the broth with a soft bloom, garlic releasing its opinion into everything else, insisting on its presence. You stir until it dissolves, until the surface swirls with traces that quickly disappear. The broth is changed now, less patient, more certain. Returning to the table, you find more cloves waiting. You repeat the peeling, the grinding, the folding, because kitchens prefer repetition. The skins pile higher, curled shavings of silence. The smell thickens, seeps into your hair, clings to the wool, finds its way into the folds of sleeves and stays there, stubborn as a vow. When the footsteps return, you do not shift. You let the brush of cloth announce itself without needing eyes. The pestle continues its circle. The garlic continues to give itself away. Wool on wool, breath near breath, nothing said. The mortar approves with another muffled note. Later, you carry the second spoonful to the hearth. The lane delivers its lesson again. Steady, predictable, necessary. You balance the weight, careful not to spill. Cloth grazes cloth, warmth grazes warmth. The broth accepts another secret and stirs itself into deeper comfort. You set the spoon aside, wipe your fingers on the edge of your apron, and breathe the kitchen's new air dense with garlic, heavy with steam, softened by tallow light. The stone walls hold it close, unwilling to share it with the world beyond. You return the pestle to its place. The mortar rests, lighter now, content. You gather the skins into your palm, dry curls brittle against your skin, and drop them into the embers where they flare briefly and vanish without ceremony. For a long moment you stand still, sleeves quiet at your sides, the faint memory of wool brushing against wool persisting more clearly than the sound of crackling fire. You let it remain, as kitchens allow such things to remain, tucked into the ordinary rhythm, folded into garlic and salt and steam. You take up the ladle again, its long handle warmed by the fire, its bowl darkened with use. You dip it into the pot with a slow, circular tilt, careful not to let the surface complain. The broth rises, thick now with the company of garlic, herbs, and the quieter confessions of onion. You lift it, steam unfurling like thin banners, the scent filling the air with a calm that is not entirely calm. The ladle hovers for a moment, as if waiting for a decision. You turn toward the row of bowls, earthen and plain, their rims uneven but trustworthy. You pour gently, letting the broth fall without splash, watching it pool in muted ripples until the clay seems warmer for it. One bowl filled, then another, the rhythm steady, the silence agreeable. As you move to the third, the kitchen shifts again. The lane narrows where it should not, and sleeves resume their practiced arrangement. Wool slides over wool, soft enough to seem accidental, deliberate enough to be remembered. You tilt the ladle without falter, though your wrist grows conscious of its own movement. The broth does not complain. You set the bowl down, careful on the table's uneven edge. The bowls sit together, steam rising in small, fragile towers. They lean into each other as though whispering, their surfaces catching the tallow light. You ladle more, your hand steady, the kitchen air heavier now with both garlic and wool. The footsteps pass behind you, measured, leaving the faintest current of air. You pause only to wipe the ladle's handle with a cloth, then dip it again. The fourth bowl receives its portion, a little less than the others, though it does not mind. Kitchens accept unfairness, without complaint. When the last bowl is filled, you arrange them in a crooked line, their clay rims glowing faintly. You step back, letting the steam rise in a shallow fog, drifting toward the rafters where smoke already lingers. The room feels smaller, though not unpleasantly so. You set the ladle across the pot's rim, balanced like a bridge. The handle extends toward the lane, uninviting yet not forbidding. Sleeves drift near again, brushing once more, as if reminding the cloth of its purpose. You keep your gaze on the bowls, though the warmth through wool is far more insistent than steam. You carry the first bowl to the side table, careful with the uneven stone floor. The liquid shivers slightly but holds. You place it down, return for another, repeat the war. The lane obliges with its narrowness, ensuring that sleeves find their conversation again and again. The bowls multiply at the side table, their steam mingling, forming a quiet chorus of warmth. When all are set, you stand before them. Steam softens your face, dampens your hair, seeps into the folds of your apron. You breathe it in, garlic clinging to every part of you now, a scent impossible to forget. The kitchen approves, its silence thick, its air warmer than stone should allow. You take the ladle once more, stir the pot lazily, watch the broth circle itself, unwilling to end. The pestle and mortar rest nearby, their task complete, but their presence still felt. You wipe the rim of one bowl with the cloth, smoothing a small spill into invisibility. As you lean over, the sleeve brushes again, the wool pressing with such slight insistence that the cloth forgets its neutrality. You finish the motion, step back, leave the bowl cleaner than before. The sleeve withdraws, patient, unhurried. The bowls remain, waiting, steam rising into the dim rafters. You rest your hand on the table's edge, feeling its rough grain, its history of spilled broth, scraped knives, and elbows that lean too long. You let the warmth linger on your arm, softer than stone, heavier than steam, as the kitchen holds everything in its quiet, ordinary embrace. The bell begins before you expect it, a low iron voice rolling across the cloister like a tide that has remembered the shore. It does not call, it collects. One long note, then a pause, then another, that seems to find its echo inside your chest. The bowls on the side table shiver slightly in their steam and settle. You look once around the kitchen, the hearth, a red animal breathing slowly, the lanterns pressed into their small duties, the row of copper turned to dark moons. And you agree with the bell that evening is finished with its cooking. You tip the ladle back into the pot, let it rest like a wooden oar on a copper lake. The cloth folds twice beneath your hands and becomes a square again, obedient to corners. You pinch the lantern wicks shorter, so the flames stand modest and straight. Ash sighs when you nudge the coals into a tidy oval that will keep one ember stubborn until morning. The room grows less bright but more sure of itself. The bell speaks again, deeper this time, as if remembering older stone. You take your robe sleeves down from their work height, wool slipping over wrists that still smell of garlic and rosemary. The scent finds a home in the cloth. It will travel with you like a quiet companion no rule can forbid. You pause at the pegs long enough to touch the yoke's worn curve with 2 fingers, a nod to weight already carried today. The mislaid cloak from earlier now stands in perfect manners, clasp answered, hem chastened. You let it be exemplary. At the threshold you lift the nearest lantern. Hornpanes cloud and clear, as if the light were breathing for you. The bell gives 3 short notes, then one long that seems to spread along the arches and lie down there to rest. The door hinge remarks upon damp weather. You answer it with the same patience you gave the stew. Beyond, the cloister receives you with its square of dark air and the cool salt of stone. Your sandals learn again the shallow groove worn into the threshold by 100 years of feet going from heat to prayer. The air outside is soft and carries the ghost of rain. Puddles along the walk are pieces of sky gathered into bowls the earth has made. They reflect the lantern as a broken ribbon, bright in 4 or 5 places, dim in between. The arches lift the bell's voice and return it at a distance, like an elder repeating words for younger ears. You move in step with the sound, slow as water poured carefully. The lantern's circle travels with you, putting small coins of light onto each flagstone and taking them back when your heel leaves. Under the eaves, a drop falls, then another, then none. Your hood tastes the last of the weather and decides not to complain. From the garden, rosemary remembers its shape by scent alone. The well rope hangs like a quiet line someone forgot to write on. A figure joins the walk a few paces ahead, lantern lowered, shadow walking taller than its owner. The bell does your introductions. You do not speak. Sleeves no longer rolled, keep their lawful distance, though the wool still remembers what wool remembers. The kitchen's warmth clings faintly at the small of your back. The corridor's cool settles on your cheekbones. You carry both temperatures, and the body, clever, makes them one. You pass the courtyard barrel that earlier debated laughter with the shadows. It is now only a barrel, answering the bell with wooden silence. A snail writes a wet comma across the stone lip. The sentence of night continues without needing your grammar. Your lantern touches the herb bed, and the time returns a scent not much larger than a thought. At the chapel steps, the bell voices its last long note and lets it lengthen into quiet. You lift your foot to the first rise and feel the familiar protest in your knee. The lantern notices and kindly brightens the next stone. Hands yours and not, yours find the same patch of smoothed wall at the same time. Skin meets cooled limestone through sleeves. There is nothing to see, and it is seen. You remove your hand first, because someone always does. Inside, the chapel holds a colder sort of air, one that folds sound into itself and returns it as hush. Beeswax keeps its soft dominion over the candles. Horn gives up its place to flame. You set the lantern where it belongs by the door, watching its shorter light find comfort among taller lights. Shadows stack themselves into pillars. The ceiling hides whatever it has chosen to remember. Robes whisper along the benches. Wood answers with a murmur as old as the building. You follow the aisle that has always been your aisle. Your place receives you without remark. Knees bend, wall sighs, breath evens. The day loosens its hands where it has held the body too firmly. Garlic lingers on your fingers when you fold them. Rosemary is a thin border across the knuckles. Soap, a distant treaty signed but not celebrated. Chant begins, low as water in a cistern. The tones move without hurry, one note making room for the next like bowls placed in a line. You do not sing loudly. You let the voice ride the breath you already have. It travels across your tongue and meets the taste the kitchen left there. The two become one shape and do not argue. The words, memorized until they no longer need meaning, rest against the palate and dissolve like steam. Around you, the community leans into the sound. Shoulders square themselves by long practice. Heads tilt in the same patient angle. Somewhere to your left, a familiar syllable arrives half a heartbeat late, as it always does. Somewhere to your right, a cough has the courtesy to be small. You keep the line, keep the breath, keep the place where hands rest. The bell is quiet now because voices have accepted its work. In the pause between psalms, you hear the chapel as a vessel, stone taking in warmth, wax adjusting its own small horizons, a wick discovering a shorter self and agreeing to it. Your pulse, which belonged to chopping and stirring an hour ago, belongs to syllables now. If you listen underneath the chant, you can still find the kitchen circle, the spoon tracing the pot, the ladle pouring evenly, the mortar's dull heartbeat. They keep time with the psalm as if kitchen and choir were two faces of one clock. The prayer moves toward its ending the way light fades on copper gently, over surfaces that already know how to accept change. The final amen is not a door shut, but a door that has decided it can stand open without letting the night in. Benches complain softly as bodies stand. Cloth rubs cloth in the language of necessary movement. You bow, because bowing arranges the spine into a truth older than thought. When you turn, the lantern at the door remembers you, and grows friendly again. Outside, the cloister air has chosen coolness over damp. The puddles have traded pieces of sky for a handful of stars, scattered and serious. Your sandals find the groove in the threshold a second time. The groove welcomes them as if the stones themselves kept attendance. You carry the lantern back along the walk. The kitchen's doorway is a lower darkness, stitched with ember glow. You open it with the same care you closed it. Warmth leans in as if it had been waiting at the sill. Behind you the bell offers no more speech. Its silence is a benediction you wear like a second hood. You step inside and let the door know it has done well. The embers show their red alphabet. The bowls rest under a cloth that has learned to be a blanket. You hang the lantern and find the spoon where you left it, a small moon of grease on its lip catching the last of the light. Night prayers are finished. The kitchen, having waited politely, accepts you back without questions. You breathe once, taste beeswax and garlic together, and agree that both belong to the same house. The kitchen, at this hour, has its own voice. It does not speak with bells or chant, but with the slower noises of cooling stone, timber remembering the day's warmth, and ash shifting beneath its blanket of grey. You stand within it, the lantern placed back on its hook, and the embers glow faintly, as though unwilling to surrender. The air is thick with what you have given it. Garlic still strong, rosemary faint but stubborn, broth absorbed into every surface. You set your hand to the table's edge and feel its roughness under the soft film of lingering steam. The bowls sleep beneath their cloth, a small congregation waiting for dawn's hunger. Each holds a measure of warmth that will not last, but it is enough for now. You lift one corner of the cloth, glance at the sheen across the broth surface, then lower it again with the same gesture you might use to comfort a restless child. The mortar and pestle sit where you left them, stone heavy, wood scarred. You brush the pestle with your sleeve, removing a dusting of garlic that refuses to depart. It leaves its scent in the wool, adding itself to the day's catalogue of perfumes: sweat, smoke, rain, tallow. Each fibre of the robe has become a ledger of small truths. You pour a ladleful of water into the pot, not to thin, not to season, but to persuade the copper to cool without complaint. It hisses gently, a final remark, then settles into quiet. You stir it once, slowly, until the water disappears into broth. The spoon's handle presses against your palm, warm where it has rested, smooth where long years have rubbed away sharpness. At the far end of the kitchen, the window admits only a suggestion of sky. Night has erased shape, leaving only darkness against darkness. Yet you sense the stars outside, scattered and careful, like crumbs set aside for birds. You lean closer, breath fogging the pain for a moment before the glass forgets you again. You sit at the bench, lowering yourself with the slow caution that your knees demand. The wood remembers you. It creaks once in recognition, then holds still. Your hands rest palm down on the table, a posture neither prayer nor labor, simply the body remembering itself. Steam still coils upward from the bowls, though thinner now, like incense at its last thread. The sleeve across from you brushes against the air, nothing more. The robe hangs, folded correctly now, though its wool has taken the garlic too. You imagine, without deciding, that another bench has received another body elsewhere in the cloister, its hands resting just so, its breath answering yours without knowing. The thought is neither comforting nor troubling. It simply exists, as stone exists, as garlic exists, as chant exists. Your shoulders loosen. The weight of the yoke no longer presses. The pestil's pulse has gone quiet, though its echo lingers in your muscles. The broth has stopped circling. It rests now, as broth must. Even the bell seems to have buried itself in silence, heavy and content above your head. You close your eyes. The kitchen remains without needing sight. Heat presses faintly against your cheek from the hearth. Cloth carries its remembered brush across your arm. The bowls breathe out the last of their warmth. A drip of water in the far basin counts time without hurry. In that stillness you sense the day folding itself, not closing like a door, but folding, neat corners aligned, as if set upon a shelf where other days already rest. It will remain there, smelling faintly of broth and rosemary, its seams touched by wool, its spine bound in stone. You will not need to open it again, though you will know where it is. You let the stillness deepen until even the garlic fades into memory. The kitchen holds you, steady and entire, as the night beyond arranges its stars. Nothing is missing, nothing is hurried. The body understands that this is rest, and the heart agrees. The kitchen holds itself now like a chest with the lid lowered. No clatter, no bustle, no smoke rising, only the settled hush of stone and timber, each surface cooling at its own slow pace. You remain within it, your body still, and your eyes half closed, as though you too have become another vessel among the pots and bowls. The air tastes faintly of garlic still, though softened by the night. The sharper edge has gone, leaving something mellow, almost sweet, clinging to your tongue and the back of your throat. You breathe it in, then let it slip out, as if passing through you is all it ever wanted. The benches stand as if carved from the same quiet as the walls. You brush your palm across the wood, feeling the grooves cut by years of knives, the polish of countless elbows, the small burns where sparks leapt from the hearth. These marks speak without voice, saying only that the kitchen has seen what you have done and will see again tomorrow. The bowls under cloth hold their silence too. The broth within has lost its steam, yet its scent still rises when you lift the corner. You replace the cloth gently, as if to tuck it back into bed. The ladle rests nearby, not needed now, but not forgotten either. Its wooden curve gleams faintly in the dim light, the kind of sheen that lingers long after hands have left it. From the ceiling, herbs hang in brittle wreaths. They move slightly with the draught, leaves brushing against each other like whispered agreements. Rosemary, sage, marjoram, all softened by time, all shadows of what they once gave. They dangle above you, as though keeping their watch until dawn. You shift your feet on the flagstones, their coolness reaching through the thin sole of your sandal. Each step you take sounds deliberate, yet muffled by the night's heaviness. The stones return no echo, only the acknowledgement of weight passing across them. You pause, let yourself feel the chill travel upward, steady and grounding. The window shows nothing now. It is a black square, framed in thick stone, without star or moon to lighten it. You lean closer, watching your breath paint pale circles against the cold glass, then fade. Beyond, there is only the unseen courtyard, the cloister arches, the garden asleep beneath dew. You know it is there even without sight, the same way you know the bell waits above, patient until it is time. Your body folds into the bench again, your robe heavy and still about you. You lower your head, resting your chin against your chest for a moment, and feel the weight ease from your neck. The silence presses, not harsh, but full. It asks nothing, it demands nothing, it only surrounds. You hear the faintest drop of water in the basin, a rhythm without pattern, as though the kitchen itself has chosen to count time differently. The sound is small, yet it marks the space as surely as a psalm sung in the chapel. You listen, and then you stop listening, letting it fall into the background where it belongs. The warmth of the hearth has nearly gone, but a thin thread of heat still lingers, weaving its way across the floor. It touches your ankles softly, as though reluctant to leave. You let it stay as long as it chooses, knowing it will fade when it is ready. You close your eyes more fully. The scents, the sounds, the textures remain around you like layers of cloth. Garlic softened, broth asleep, herbs dry and fragile, wood worn smooth, stone cooling slowly. Each detail folds upon the next until they blur into one fabric, wrapping you without seam. Your breath evens. The day has ended. The kitchen has ended. You rest in the space between, not moving, not needing. The monastery holds you. The silence holds you. And the night itself has made a place for you among its darker hours. The monastery drifts into a deeper quiet, as though the very walls have begun to breathe more slowly. You sit where you are, unmoving, with only the faint press of wood against your back and the low chill of stone beneath your sandals. The rhythm of the day is finished, folded into the night like parchment set aside, its ink still drying but no longer meant to be read. The scents have dimmed now to shadows, garlic, broth, herbs, bread, each one faint, each one softened, until they seem almost imagined. They drift together and become one single fragrance, not sharp, not strong, simply present. You breathe it in without thought, the way you might breathe in the air of a cloister garden, knowing it has always been here, waiting. You hear almost nothing. Only a wooden beam shifting quietly as it settles into its own rest. Only the faint slide of your sleeve when you move your hand a little. Only the hush of your own breath passing in and out, steady, even, calm. The darkness deepens at the edges of the kitchen. Corners disappear. Doorways become part of the wall. The window no longer shows even the faintest glimmer. It is only blackness, full and still, like a cloth drawn over the room. You do not need to look beyond it. Everything you need is here, within these stone boundaries that hold and soften you. The longer you remain, the heavier your limbs feel, as though the quiet itself has settled into them. Your shoulders loosen, your hands rest easily in your lap, your eyes hover just behind their lids. You are part of the night now, folded into its rhythm. Nothing is urgent, nothing is waiting, only sleep, as calm as stone. We hope this glimpse into old customs has been a calm and pleasant one. If it made you curious for more, you can like, share, or leave a kind comment. And if you wish, subscribe to be here for the next unhurried tradition we explore together. End of script. Sweet dreams.